Starting live.
Yay! Success.
All right. Well, first of all, how's my webcam look? Brand spanking new webcam.
It's pretty. It's pretty.
Unfortunately, the subject isn't as much, but what can you do about that? All right. So we working.
One thing on the bottom right corner of the screen, there is a sharing option with the video link.
Okay. So click on links.
Yeah, and send me the link in the chat so that I can, because without the link I cannot access the video because it's unlisted.
Let's see. And now if I want to send you a chat, I'm going to click here and I'm going to chat in the open chat. Is that right?
You can chat either here or
Got it.
here. Yeah, that works. And I will just add it to watch later so I can see it later.
Okay.
Cool.
So while I'm at it, I'm just going to record this as well. So there's nothing more boring for a video than talking about the technical stuff. But thank you for everyone's patience. First time using a video camera. This is my video camera. I'm so gosh darn proud. And I'm learning to use Google Hangouts as a participant rather than merely somebody who gets invited all the time. So my name's Francis Roy. I'm speaking with Barney Tearspell. And Barney and I were talking on Hangouts, and we discussed a variety of issues. The issues revolved mainly around the subject of social justice and a number of other things. Barney hit me up on this and suggested that, well, his mission is to commit a genocide on straw men. And I think that's a fine idea. And let's see where we can agree, and let's see where we might not, and see how we can work things out. So you want to bring something up?
Just as a basic introduction, we've talked a bunch or interacted a bunch on Google Plus, always in text form, and I'm guessing that by all, like, if you make a checklist, I am a globalist, socialist, feminist, SJW. Like I would fall into each of those categories.
Right.
However, I don't think those things mean the same thing to me as they do to a lot of people that are kind of attacking those things and turning them up to be the most horrible things in the world, which are why we can't have nice things and which are ruining everything. And I would love to talk to somebody across the aisle, especially a libertarian, or my introduction to the other side of this topic was Sargon of Akkad. Right. I've been watching Sargon and Thunderfoot and Armored Skeptic and people like that for a long time.
Right.
Due to the atheism, skepticism side of everything. And then when atheism plus hit and when social justice hit and then everybody turned on Anita Sarkeesian, I continued watching and I got introduced to the topics, to the other side of the aisle through them. Right.
Okay.
But I never had a decent chance to talk to somebody about it. Right. I've been an audience.
Got it. So in a way, what's useful about this is all of the things that all the positions that you claim to take here, I take the contrary view, and mainly because I've been dealing with this stuff since the late 1980s, but I hadn't gotten into the habit of speaking about them. So what's good about this is there's two things. One, where what I see a lot of this conversation doing is the clarification of our terms and explaining why we think these things as we think. And the second, it'll just be practice for me to speak English. I haven't spoken English in a long time, and I haven't worked out my ideas verbally in a long time. So hopefully this will be good. So tell you what, let's start off with this. If you were to take the broadest position that you feel comfortably describes you, for example, I'll make something up. I'll tell you what, I'll start first to give an example of what we could do, and you can follow if you like. I refer to myself politically as a centrist. Now, when I use the word centrist, I'm accepting that the Overton window, that the default reference point is liberalism in the broadest of senses. Going from there, I also do not accept the positions of feminism. I do not accept the positions, and we'll talk about definitions that'll be important. We'll talk about, we can talk about feminism, we can talk about social justice, we can deal with the philosophy of it, we can deal with the politics of it, we can deal with the epistemology of it as you like. So if I refer to myself as a centrist, what I mean by this is, in practice, all Westerners are in fact liberals, but liberals in the broadest sense, under which we have social liberals and social conservatives. But social conservatives and libertarians, by the way, also fall under the general umbrella of liberalism. The opposite of liberalism would be authoritarian or non-individualistic ideologies. Islam would be an example. Communism would be another example, where the primacy of individual self-authority, of sovereignty, if you will, of the locus of power and the locus of responsibility for which we are given rights to execute are the central tenets of central tenets of liberalism. So where would you fall? As I've described myself as a centrist, where would you fall under that category?
So
sorry, there's something I missed.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I should have clarified this. When I speak to myself of myself as a centrist, I am first and foremost a liberal, but also in the subpositions of social liberalism and social conservatism, I accept some things from one side and some things from the other, and I reject some things from one side and I reject some things from the other. In other words, the position that I come to is not a group belonging position. It is merely that the positions, I can see the good and bad of both sides, and it seems to me that when one makes up his or her own mind about a given subject, that when you don't fit in the camp, well, you end up in the middle, so to speak.
So my perception of myself is likewise that I'm a moderate centrist, though by any means that I can verify it, by any test that I can take, by any checklist, I fall squarely to the left and to the liberal, right?
What would be an example of a test that you could take? Are you talking things like the political compass test, for example?
Stuff like that, yeah. So
okay, so you also are
liberal, and there is also, so I would say that as liberal has a counter in authoritarian.
Say that again, please.
In the same way that liberal has a counter in authoritarian,
yes.
In the same way that left has a counter in right, there is a third axis which is not fairly represented, which is progressive versus conservative, right? Conservatives get mentioned a lot as bunched in with right and bunched in with authoritarian, but I would say that that's a separate category and a separate axis for measurement.
When you use the term conservative and you use the term liberal, what do you mean by that?
So liberal meaning personal freedoms, social freedoms, equality, respect for self-determination, democracy, stuff like that.
Okay.
When I would say that the opposite of that is authoritarianism.
Authoritarianism, yes, I would agree.
It's not conservatism. Conservatism is preservation of values, preservation of societal and governmental structures, of values, of traditions, of right.
How about if I
Whereas,
do this and you tell me if you agree with this? General conservatism favors the preservation of the social order, favors tradition, preserving the status quo, or very slow and careful reform. It favors preservation of wealth and of private ownership, and slow organic change, anti-doctrinaire as opposed to top-down change. Culture. Sorry, go on.
And I would say that opposed to that is progressivism, which is, guys, there's better than this. We don't need to pay that much attention to tradition. We need to aim to get the best results and find out as quickly as possible what the best way to achieve those things is. And let's go forward. Let's stop worrying.
Social liberalism.
What?
Social liberalism.
Fair enough.
Okay, so now we know what we mean. So you used the word progressive. Was there a reason for using that, or is it just because it was a handy term that came to your mind at once?
It's a handy term that I've heard people identify as.
Okay.
That I agree on some points, right?
Okay. So
and that I find as a neat symmetry, has neat symmetry with the concept of conservatism.
Okay, so I would call that social liberalism and social conservatism. Just as I've read the just as I was doing a mind map on this. I love using mind maps; they're very handy. But I didn't write one down for social liberalism. But social liberalism itself is for government intervention in cultural affairs.
Yes.
It is. It favors top-down change. That is change that is initiated or supported by a government. It favors a wide expanse of cultural liberties. So this is where you'll get some of the stuff like gay rights, feminism, you name.
Multiculturalism.
Multiculturalism is a perfect example. And that's one of the things that we'll be discussing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I think so far we pretty much understand each other, and these terms pretty much fall within the standard the standard definitions. Now, I'll be very happy to be corrected if there's anything to correct. Once this goes up live, if we put it live and people want to clarify points thoughtfully, I'll be very happy to look at those. So that's your position. Now, what's the first thing we can argue about?
Oh, damn it.
Okay, what are you most comfortable in discussing?
All of it. Like, I have no shame of my beliefs, and I don't mind being corrected on them. Okay. So the thing that kind of started this scream, my initial reach out to you of let's have a hangout was a post by you with your primary beef with social justice.
Okay.
The post is, the premise of social justice is that people are powerless victims. The response is not collaboration, but blame. It resists, above all, personal responsibility, and to the degree that one gives this up, one gives up personal power, choice, merit, and the opportunity to flourish.
Okay.
And then we had two very long posts.
All right.
That we can kind of
so do you
reenact here.
Okay. Do you agree or do you disagree with my statement? What part and why?
So I very much disagree that the premise of social justice is that people are powerless victims.
Okay, so then what that tells me is the first thing we should do is clarify, what do we mean when we say social justice? When I use the word social justice, I'm referring to it the way that there could be more than one meaning to it. Uh, when we speak of social justice, we could be referring to the liberty of people to live as they will, unhampered by people. This is mere liberalism.
Fair enough.
This isn't progressivism. This isn't anything special. Uh, but social justice these days has been used to convey the connotations of what you would refer to also as progressivism in a ball, where it is, I would refer to it as, if the positive side of liberalism, the general liberal, if the general of general liberalism, if the positive of general liberalism is to empower the individual to live their lives unhampered, unhindered by government, and that the government serves the purpose of protecting our rights, that is, the let to do what it is that we want to do in order to fulfill our duties and obligations towards society. If this is its purpose, the way that things are now done is we have socially people interfering with others in the name of compassion. Now, compassion is an excellent thing. I encourage compassion. An excess of compassion, however, is called being a chump.
Mm-hmm.
So the fine line between being compassionate, meaning I recognize that you're gay, I will not interfere with you. This is mere liberalism. Social justice, however, is we support gay people, therefore you shall engage in these activities, or you shall refrain in engaging in these activities as spoken by members of fellow citizens in the culture. Social justice is actually I refer to it more as the lesser sense, the sense that I'm arguing about, is the cultural phenomena that is based on a hyper compassion, a hyper social liberalism, mixed with Marxism, mixed with postmodernism, mixed with, and I hate to say this is going to sound horrible. I'm not the snob that this statement is going to make me sound, mixed with ignorance as to what it is that they really want to do. It is usually put forward by young people these days.
Mm-hmm. It's that old adage: if you're not a communist at 20, you have no heart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, some people never grew out of this. And what happened is they got into a variety of bureaucracies. And in such, having this ideology, which is founded on the following: people are helpless, and people are oppressed by oppressors, and people are helpless. Therefore, the way to help the helpless is to fight the oppressors, to hinder, to control, to manage the oppressors, so that the weak and helpless can achieve the things that they want to do. But there's a contradiction in this, insofar as it's no longer allowing the weak and the vulnerable to expand themselves, to flourish, because liberalism already provides them this. They have gotten it to the point of, well, we will now create programs which hinder other people from doing things, and we will decide in the moment what the rules are as to how you should behave. Microaggression, bad person. Mind you, microaggression is a foolish notion, but they will push this on you. They will teach it in university. People are losing jobs because of these things. When I refer to social justice, this is what I refer to. And if you take a look at the idea, you list out the ideas, and then you start doing all the presuppositions. In order for this to be true, what has to be true beneath it? And in order for this thing to be true, what has to be true? And if you follow it all the way down, you will find that currently what is expressed as social justice is not the civil rights type of let people live their lives so that they can so that they can flourish on their own terms, it has become treat people as weak and ignorant. This is what I object to.
Okay. So I agree with a lot of that. And if I allow for different wording, I agree with even more.
Okay.
Yes, it is a dynamic of people which have an advantage versus people who have a disadvantage. I do not perceive it as victimhood. I do not perceive it as somebody being powerless as such. I perceive it as inherent inequality.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm just going to take notes here.
Sure.
Advantage versus disadvantage. Okay, so that's privilege.
Yes.
Okay, so please continue on.
So, given that the situation in the world is already ideal, that everybody has an equal starting position and everybody has an equal opportunity, I would agree with your position entirely, and this whole debate would be not the debate between the two of us, but the debate overall would be non-existent, right?
Okay.
However,
so the world's in utopia.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be in utopia. It would. This specific problem wouldn't exist. There would be no need for social justice, right?
Okay.
This gets represented as though we're trying to solve it by forcefully uplifting some groups at the expense of others. And there is an element of that, but I think it's justified, and I will try to justify it.
Go ahead.
Later on. The idea is that, damn it, I maybe should have thought this through more before talking to you. But
working it out.
Ideally, we shouldn't be focusing on race, gender, sex, anything. We should be looking at socially disadvantaged group of people, not by those other groupings, but directly by a grouping of these people are being raised in a society where they don't have an equal access to education, don't have an equal access to opportunity, don't have, right?
Okay. Now,
the circumstance of race, of sex, of gender, of all of that is historical, political, social. It's the construct. It's why those things are social constructs. If those things were not to be perceived as such by anybody, the whole thing would be irrelevant. However, go ahead.
There's a couple things in there, and although the purpose of this conversation is to be argumentative, I hope that I don't come across as disagreeably argumentative.
No, that's fine. I just want to understand and would like you to understand my point. That's
when I stop you frequently, because there's a lot of assumptions in a few words that you've made, and so please do keep notes and keep track of the overall thing, and I'll try to do it with you here. One of the claims, your first claim was that we should be helping people with what you call social disadvantages. Examples of that are unequal access to education, unequal access to services, and unequal access to, for lack of a better word,
opportunity.
Opportunity. Okay. First, why do you think that should be? And second, can you give me examples of where that is in fact the case? And third would be, are you proposing a solution? Are you proposing a solution that supports the current status quo, which is that we're experiencing right now? Or are you just claiming at the moment, I recognize that there are circumstances that we need to address?
Both.
Okay.
Oh, I'm claiming that these are circumstances that we need to address, and the solutions which are being partially implemented, partially proposed, advocated for, even violently pushed by some, are possible solutions.
Okay.
Right?
Why should we address this? This is the first question. Because the question why gets us to a value. So why should it be addressed?
Equality.
For what?
Equality of opportunity. I would say that that's a tenet of liberalism, that given the same amount of ability and effort, you should get the same outcome.
Should you?
Or an approximately same outcome. That circumstance should play as little a part as possible.
But it will, and it always will.
No, it will, and it always will. I would say that it's our duty as a society to minimize that to the greatest possible extent, right?
Okay, and all this is in the service of human flourishing, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're okay with that. Now, so the next question is, what are examples, do you believe, of people in the Western world? By the way, may I ask, I'm in Quebec, Canada. May I ask where you're generally located? Because
I'm in Zagreb, in Croatia.
Okay, so our conditions are going to have a lot of similarity, but a lot of differences. And Europeans and North Americans speak about things a little bit differently, and so we'll really want to make sure that we're not taking our words for granted. So what are examples? Like in Zagreb, it might be different than it is in Canada. What are examples of services that are being either denied or partially that somebody does not have full access to the way that another might? So first of all, these services, are these institutional services like banking, government services? What are examples of these services?
Not necessarily, and it's not services as such, it's circumstance, right?
Okay.
So an example which might be relatable to the racial tensions in North America, is our relation with the Gypsies, with Roma people.
Okay.
Right? So we are very predominantly a white country.
Okay.
We don't have many immigrants, either colored. Well, immigration is not a big problem in Croatia because it's not a forward economy, right? It's not one of the richest countries in the world where everybody would want to live.
Okay.
So you will have an upper hand on me there in any argument, but I think that the concept of social exclusion of a group by race can be applied to Roma. There is a lot of racism towards them. Okay. I am not ashamed to admit that I am racist towards them.
Okay.
Which is something that I'm acutely aware of and trying to correct. What?
When you use the word racist, what do you mean by that word?
I mean that I can best describe it with an example. If I'm in public transport and there is a Roma person next to me, I will suddenly be acutely aware of where my wallet is.
Okay. So The word racism typically has it has two good definitions and one piece of garbage definition. The piece of garbage definition is power plus prejudice. We can address it if you need to, but for now, let's put it aside. When people speak of racism, racism means one of two things. One, the belief that one race is superior or inferior to others. The second the second way of using the word racism is to speak to a prejudice or an animus towards an individual based on their race. So, for example, I might not like somebody because they're black. If this were the case, I would be referred to as racist. Now, I may not believe that my race is superior to theirs or that theirs is inferior to mine, but that would meet the second definition: an animus or a disparagement of the person based on their race. Or I might have none of this, yet believe that my race or their race is superior to the other. That would be the first definition of racism. So you've told, if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is you're on the bus, you see a Roma person, you cover your wallet. This would be the issue, the second definition.
Yeah. The thing is that the singular cause for me covering my wallet is their outward physical appearance. I do not know that person. I know nothing about that person except for visually classifying that person as a gypsy, right?
Okay. Because gypsies are like what?
What?
And because gypsies are like what? I'm going to bet you.
Yeah, because there is a stereotype about gypsies that gypsies are uneducated thieves, lazy people who will not hesitate to steal, lie, right?
Okay.
Those are the stereotypes about gypsies.
Now, I don't know anything about gypsies. I don't think I've ever met one. Is any of that true?
Yes.
Okay. But is it true 100% of the time? Or, no. Okay. No. So we acknowledge that we have a human heuristic that
exactly.
Certain groups of people will have a tendency to behave in a certain way. And the easiest way to recognize this is through the color of their skin, their manner of dress, their accent, or what have you. Now,
so the thing that
true, is it only partly is it wrong if it's partly true? Does it infer something about your character if it is partly true and therefore obviously partly false?
So my view on that is that it's a social construct. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Is it?
Yes.
How?
They are viewed as such. They are treated as though they're such, which very often leaves them with no other option than to behave as such. And even those that overcome those obstacles of expectation, rejection, a higher bar to cross, even when they cross it, they will still be viewed as such, right?
Okay.
There is no virtue that they can show to separate themselves from that stereotype.
Okay, so you kick a dog, he's going to turn bad, and that's just the way things are. And so
no. The point is that you kick a good dog and it remains good, and then you kick it again and you keep kicking it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Where you don't recognize that, where you assign that to their race rather than their circumstance, right? Where you say it's because they are gypsies and not because they are massively unemployed, and people will level that on them, even though they will not employ them. They will not there is a genuine hardship for those people to find proper employment due to the color of their skin or due to their facial features. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what.
I would just like to roll back one step. You were talking about definitions of racism, and so I'm not sure which one of those I would fit, but I think it's fitting to kind of give my view on that. So my view is that races don't exist. I'm a race non-realist, that there is no difference between somebody having a skin of different color or somebody having ethnic features of different ethnic features, or somebody having blue eyes. Those are vagaries of genetics. Now, the fact that we can, for example, there would be no difference between somebody having black skin versus somebody having, I don't know, black liver. But if somebody had black liver in such a way that you cannot outwardly identify it, it would affect their lives not the least bit. Nobody would simply not, it wouldn't come into any calculation of affecting their life in any way, right? The fact that these features are outwardly forces us to see them, recognize them, and ascribe everything to them. Everything that fits to every person of that skin color, everything that fits to every person of of those features. Unwarrantedly doing that, succumbing to our, I don't know, mental failure of stereotyping things and batching them by visual identity is racism. Racism can be both positive and negative, right? Saying that black people should get something because they're black is equally racism as it is that they are violent because they're black, or they are, right? Just separating them out from society, segregating them as a separate group to be treated as members of that separate group is racism.
Okay, so let me see. If I were to, I'll make a statement, you tell me whether you agree with it or not. Individuals should be treated, ideally, individuals should be treated impartially under law, in institutions, and socially in culture.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, we agree on that. The second thing I'm trying to get at, though, is one of the things that I object to about social justice using an issue of racism, that is the prejudice of one individual against another because of the color of their skin, is they make it a moral issue. And rather than making it a practical issue, rather than saying, here are some tools how you can better assess the quality of a stranger's character at first glance. Here's some tools. Use them. See if they work for you. What they do is they say, you're a bad person and you should feel terrible about yourself because, you know, you've done this thing, and by doing this thing, that makes you bad. Essentially, we don't judge you by the color of your skin. We judge you by your ability or inability to discriminate between individuals regardless of their race. The moralization has become a tool to beat a well-meaning population down. Perfectly decent people who don't mind anything about another person other than their behavior are trashed and thrashed for choices of words, for subtleties that make microaggressions seem like mountains. This is one of my objections to social justice and the use of racism. I fully agree that we should treat each other impartially and judge each other based on our behavior towards each other. That's my criteria.
Okay, so in that very thread, I agree to that. I agree that that's a flaw of modern social justice movements, right? That both the kind of idolization of victims, the yeah, idolization of victims, and the deprecation of people who disagree. Now, I see those things as misfiring rhetoric, right? In the circle of people that I talk to, in the circle of people that I interact, that are like-minded to me, I cannot point out such a person.
Can you please rephrase that?
In the circle of sorry, in the circle of people that I interact with,
Yes.
that agree with my point of view, that are my echo chamber,
Which we are agreeing with.
I cannot point out a person which does that, which idolizes victims, right? Those qualities that are ascribed to social justice left,
right,
are the far extreme, which is wrong.
Can we do this? In order to refer to these people, how about we use a term, just for this conversation, call them the extreme left. And
fair enough.
What we get to do in this is we get to say we recognize the Overton window. And by the way, the extreme left are within the Overton window, but extreme is always based on the center, right? The further away from the center, the more extreme someone is. So these are extreme liberals. So just for the moment, so that we can distinguish what I think of as being ordinary, thoughtful, decent people from those who've lost their marbles, we'll call them the extreme left. And so slowly we get to specify what goes into the bucket of extreme left. And that gives us perhaps a better definition and a better understanding of what I object to when I use these terms.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay.
But it's kind of important for me to point out that I identify as all of those things, yet I don't recognize myself in any of the criticisms of those things, right?
Okay. So you might not be someone on the extreme left. You'll notice that we've been agreeing, even though I argue against certain things. You'll notice that so far we've been agreeing. And when you refer to yourself as a centrist, well, as a centrist, I kind of recognize myself in there too, and I don't do these things either. So I guess that means neither of us are extreme left. We might be socially left, and to the degree that we can figure out later if that's important. But so far, okay, so we agree on the values and the errors of racism. And this was pursuant to the discussion of equal opportunities and not getting a fair shake. So are these people, they're Roma, I think they're called, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are these Roma denied by the government or by any social institutions such as churches, banks, media? Are they denied opportunity that the non-Roma are not, that they have access to freely and fully?
By the government? No, of course not. There are programs for incorporating them into society, for supporting them, for they have their own party, which is whose only point in agenda is promotion of Roma people and both financially and culturally, and right.
Okay, but if they have programs supporting them, what I'm trying to get at is, if the government is not discriminating against them, are banks discriminating against them?
In some ways, yes. But again, it's not a thing where you can blame the banks. These people are massively unemployed. These people have low incomes. Therefore, they cannot get credited. Therefore, they cannot, right? they are financially disadvantaged, though there is no bank that has a policy saying, if you're a Roma, you cannot open an account here.
Right.
If you're a Roma, you cannot submit for credit.
But would a non-Roma be treated the same way if they had exactly the same conditions?
If they had,
if a non-Roma had the credit rating, had I don't know what it is.
So
poverty.
If they had exactly the same conditions,
yes.
In which sense, right? That's such a broad statement that if they had exactly the same conditions,
well,
they would be
if they had
Roma.
But let's just say.
So I can give you an example that was in literally my neighborhood just a few years back. There was a huge complex of social housing being built.
Okay.
Which are cheap apartments, which are then expected to be Roma populated because they are not that well-to-do. They're well below average in income.
Right.
And there was a public protest by the people living in my neighborhood.
Okay.
Against those buildings, with vocally stating, this will be populated by Roma, and our schools will be crowded by Roma.
Okay.
And we don't want that.
Okay.
It's fine that if it's fine if the government wants to help them, but we don't want them going in the same school with our children.
We in North America and Canada, we call that NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Exactly. Right.
So okay. So far, what I'm hearing is that this is this really a race issue, or is this a class issue?
Yes. Yes, it's a class issue. That's my initial statement is it should be a class issue.
Okay.
However, there is an easily identifiable subgroup which is especially hard hit by that class inequality because they are easily identifiable. And
is it because they're easily identifiable?
Yes, it is.
Because of their habits.
Yes, because the outcry was not we don't want poor people in schools. The outcry was we don't want Roma in our schools, right?
Okay. Now, see, that's a very specific case where you can point. First of all, it's not a governmental issue. That is a cultural issue, and that's something I think that's important for us to distinguish. Are they treated any differently by law on average?
No.
Okay.
So in the outcomes, yes, they will get police profiled, for example, right? Okay. If there is a theft on your street and there's a gypsy person living in your street, they will get questioned.
Okay.
Right? Just by default.
But will they be unfairly judged once in court, or will they be judged more or less the equivalent way that a non-Roma person would be?
I cannot say that. That depends on the judge that they get, on the jury that they get, right? So will they get profiled or not?
Okay, so all right. So what I understand then, it's not institutional. What we're talking about is cultural prejudice.
Yes.
So the issue is not one of racism as it is of cultural prejudice towards a specific group of people.
That is racism.
Yes,
right? That's
definition. By the second definition, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when the term systemic racism gets thrown out,
right,
this is what I mean, right? That in it's not that there are laws against them. It's not that there are systems in government which are put in place to discourage those peoples, those groups. It's that their circumstance is severely disadvantaged by a thing which has nothing to do with it and should have nothing to do with it, namely the color of their skin, right?
So, okay, I understand your point. And ideally, I think that point is well enough made. And I think that when we can specify very precisely, for example, but I don't like the word systemic or institutional because it's not by institutions and it's not by the system as we understand it, the system of interlocking institutions. I would call this cultural prejudice. Now, I can see why somebody would say, I can value the word of a person who says we should treat each other impartially. And when possible, we should overcome our own prejudice, our own gut instinct, and evaluate an individual person by person based on their behavior, based on all the subtleties of their comportment. I can understand this, and that makes sense. So if we have a problem with cultural prejudice, I think that's something specific that we can address. And one of the ways that we do that is we start marking out, for example, what are the top 10 things about these people? How many of these are a myth? How many of these are true? How many of these can more or less be categorized by percentage? An example of this, and I'm just making this thing up just to convey an illustration rather than to support an argument, would be one myth about Roma is that they are criminals. Well, if you have a statistic that says, well, only 40% have ever gone through the justice system, then we know 60% isn't that 60% aren't or aren't likely to be. So next time you meet this person, consider that he's got a 6 out of 10 chance of being perfectly safe and that you don't have to check your wallet and that you could probably befriend him.
Yeah. So, yes, if everything doesn't have a history. Yes, if that again, systemic racism isn't already in place. Now, when I use the word systemic racism, I mean what you're referring to as cultural, as there is a predominant sense among all of populace, and that populace includes teachers, policemen, judges, bank clerks, right? So if that's a predominant belief of all people, it will affect those people who make decisions about.
I agree.
Right? So even without an overtly express law that says you must question a gypsy if there is a crime, a gypsy will get questioned. A gypsy will get blamed.
Of course.
A gypsy will get to court, and a gypsy will get convicted. Right?
Well, they hopefully they will only be convicted if that which they are alleged to have done is in fact proved to be unreasonable doubt.
Hopefully. Exactly. Right?
So,
but
so
with the prejudice that is present and that is evident, right? It is expected that they will be in those errors that are made, in that circumstantial evidence will count more against them than against a normal person. That's a big faux pas. Not a normal person, but an average person, right?
Sure.
I didn't think to.
And normal do basically mean similar things.
Yeah, I know. So lapses like that are why I can confidently say that I am racist, right?
Okay. So now, if
just one. So the thing that I'm trying to get at is that yes, one part of correcting the error is what you have said, is checking to see what really is there and what isn't there, and making sure that it's widely and publicly communicated. Right?
Be skeptical about your own beliefs.
Yeah, let's kill all the stereotypes that don't fit the class. Right?
I'm having a hard time disagreeing with you.
However, there is the thing why we are so intent on calling it a social construct, on calling it systemic and stuff like that, is if those people are shunned by the rest of the society and pushed into effectively a ghetto, right? Where they are being brought up by other people who are shunned by society, and this is where we'll get to that victim narrative, right? If they have special schools which are accidentally segregated, which are not intentionally, huh?
Accidentally?
Yeah, well,
Use the air quotes, meaning deliberately segregated.
Huh, not by design, but by predominant effect. Exactly the case in my neighborhood, right? If people are going to come out to the streets protesting that these buildings are even being built because they will be going to the same school with their children, then somebody will build a school for that block of buildings, which will have only gypsy
right
students, and this school will have no gypsy students, and that's segregation. The fact that it's not segregation written by law,
right
it's I wouldn't call that accidental, right? People demanded it, and that came to be.
Okay, so
right? So deliberate, but not deliberate in the sense that there is some evil person in the city government who has decided that they will.
How about deliberate with a pretext?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So
now
the thing is that there in the upbringing, in the education, in the setup of a person, if a whole class of people is being excluded, if a whole class of people does not share the experience of the broader community, and they are kind of encouraged by that community to exclude themselves, because any outreach into the broader Croatian community will be increasing in that punishment. Whereas if they stick to their own group, they will just be one of their group, right? And then you get another form.
So here's a question then, is what is their locus of power? What is the assumption here? The assumption is that because people treat them in a certain way, if you kick a good dog long enough, eventually he'll turn bad. That's the argument you're making, that human beings have the ability to change their lives, even despite in the face of hardship. How much do we beat ourselves over the head about being evil towards these people? And at what point do we start going, okay, well, we can also teach these people things that work? I mean, it's like, look, if all the people, if they happen to be particularly poor and they're holding together as a group, it's not, and we know that race isn't that which is holding them back directly, because it's not, it doesn't change the brain, it doesn't change their neurology, their ability to see, to hear, to think. At what point can we, when is it okay to say it's culture?
It is culture.
I mean, their culture, the people being excluded.
At the point where a person with equal effort and equal talent gets equal outcome. Right?
Yeah, give me a second to work that through. I might be right. This is the boring part for the audience.
I know that there is no audience unless we decide later on to have one.
Okay. At what point is it okay to point out? Okay, so the question is, at what point is it all right to point to weaknesses in a culture that creates these results? And you say when everyone is treated equally. There's a certain point to that, but that's half the equation. What I'm hearing is when the world is perfect, then we can tell them, well, now it's time to shape up.
No, we can tell them. We can tell them to shape up right now.
Okay.
We do tell them to shape up right now.
So we do both simultaneously.
Yes.
I have no problem with that. What I object to with the social justice people, the extreme left, sorry, is that they will say you never get to do that. Ever.
Oh, that's rubbish.
You never get to tell them that something about their culture isn't helping them. You never get to tell them that their religion is holding them back. You never get to tell them that their mental habits, their culture habits, their financial habits are holding them back. You can't, because doing that is bad. And if you do that, you're bad. Therefore, you are oppressing them, and and they are already weak. And by telling them these things, you make them even weaker, which makes you even worse. That's what I object to when I refer to the extreme left. Now,
yeah, I would say that's a rubbish argument, right? That's
okay. So far, you and I are agreeing on pretty much everything, and in a reasonable amount of depth and breadth too.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay.
So,
okay. So what else do we got?
What would you say to affirmative action?
It's a good question. I do not endorse notions of affirmative action because my presupposition is, and I apply this to myself first, is that I, as an individual, if I accept that I own my life and that I am, I don't want to use the term, but it's a very useful one, that if I am sovereign in my life, that is, I make my life, I decide my life, I am responsible for my life, the good and the bad, it's up to me. I understand that I'm in a social context, but it is up to me. I do not believe that there are good cultural criteria, and right now I'll dismiss race. You might get me to hesitate on class, because I think that class is really one of the bigger influences. More than race, more than sex, more than any of these other things, I think class makes a difference, because what we refer to class in the stratas of society are in fact levels on the hierarchy of social status and influence. So I can see why one might wish to assist somebody of a lower social class. Let us take a poor kid from Liverpool who will never be aristocracy. I can understand why we might want to give them a helping hand, but to what degree? If the intent is to provide them with an equal opportunity, well, it seems to me the only time that affirmative action is useful is when the opportunity is not there, and affirmative action is merely the enactment of impartiality.
Okay, so my counter would... Whoa. I'm having some echo from you. Huh? It's gone. Never mind.
Okay. May I ask you to hold for just one moment, please, as I go get a drink?
Go ahead.
So work out your argument while you're doing it. I'll be back in 30 seconds. Okay, so go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay, so I would say that you're misjudging who the target of affirmative action is.
Can you please repeat that?
I think that you're misjudging who the target of affirmative action is.
Okay.
You're assuming that it's the person on whom affirmative action is acting, right? That when you say we'll accept this many Black students, that those students are the recipients of affirmative action. And
that is my understanding.
And I would say that that's not true, that's not the intention.
Okay.
So that the recipients of, the intended recipients of affirmative action are the children, the future children in the neighborhood where those people live, in the group, in the society where those people live.
Okay, so I'll hold on to that for a second. I just want to clarify something. When we speak of affirmative action, are we speaking of a number of laws across the country and whatever their variations, whose purpose is to artificially provide an opening in the windows of opportunities that they are historically denied here and now, to teach them or to assist them in building their own future? Is this what you mean by affirmative action?
Yes, I mean the laws that state that fire brigades will have this many women. I mean the laws that state that colleges will have this many black kids.
Okay. Now I disagree more strongly now.
That's why I picked that topic, because okay. I assume that that's where we would disagree. Let me present the case.
All right.
So in that scenario of a ghetto of people grouping by their likes and by their circumstance, being forced into a group from the outside and choosing to group from the inside, right? How do you break that apart? How do you get information in there if nobody's going to college, if nobody's getting the chance, like if they go to their own schools, if they never get those opportunities? So a person in an average neighborhood will have perhaps college-educated parents, relatives, neighbors, mixed in with other people, right? The idea is that if you have an entity, a group, which is so tightly closed that you get some members of that group to get educated and return to that community, and until you saturate it with higher goals, higher standards. If they're surrounded by people whose main way of surviving in life is theft, and you provide them with examples of people who live well because they've been educated, because they got good jobs, because they will have something to aspire to. They will be able to interact with those people, to talk to them, to ask them how they got there. And they might be motivated to hunt for that opportunity to go to college, to study harder, right? They might get some base inkling of why they should be doing something that you and I will agree is available to them, except that they have no information why they should do that, how they should do that. Like there is an enrollment process going on for a college that you will go to your older brother or your dad, and they will inherently understand how that works.
Do you?
Okay, sorry.
Do you understand that what you're talking about, an extreme leftist would refer to as cultural imperialism?
But I don't care.
So basically, I think I understand what you're saying. Before I answer, let me just make sure I'm getting you correctly here. The purpose, from what you're telling me, the purpose of going out of your way to make life easier in a certain respect, such as free education or granted education, is to inculcate a set of values, skills, and habits, ways of thinking.
Resources.
Resources, what do you mean?
Mental resources, fair enough.
Mental resources, fine. Mental resources with the intention that they will return to the community and propagate them. number of issues here. First of all, I don't think I have too much of a problem uh, with the idea, so long as we're real clear about who the recipients are and what the conditions are. Another issue related, for example, not enough women on boardrooms, not enough women in the fire department. These I would utterly reject, because there's a difference between educating oneself, that is the opportunity to transform oneself in a way that improves one's life, and placing a non-meritorious person in a position that they didn't earn. Ideally, everybody would earn their own education. But education, mentality, these are some of those things that are kind of difficult to work through. It takes a lifetime to become educated. And I understand that when you don't have an education when you're young, it affects your future. So I could see that as having a certain value, so long as we're clear on what it is here, that we're actually that we're not aiming specifically because you're black, because you're gay, because you're Roma, because of these immutable characteristics of your being, that you get it. Now, if we look at something like class, again, you take you take that young kid from the Ozarks, who's always lived in the mountain, doesn't know the city that much, didn't have electricity growing up. I could see why somebody like that, you might go, look, we recognize your background, that you never got to learn math, you never learned to read and write. There's an opportunity for you, should you choose to accept it. In return, we would expect this of you. That I'd have very little problem with. But the idea of putting a woman as a fireman merely because she's a woman, or placing her on a corporate board merely because she's female, is rather repellent. It's like saying, we're going to put you on, I don't know, I can't come up with a good example. The difference is supporting someone when they're young and teaching them to transform themselves, providing them the tools to transform themselves, that I'm okay with. Simply sticking somebody in a non-traditional position merely because of their physical attributes, I cannot uphold. Quota hires, no.
So I agree with a lot of that, though I again I think I can counter both the examples for the fire brigade and it's the same class of affirmative action, right? It's the same. The person that's getting it is not the recipient of the benefit. That person is receiving more than their fair share. They're getting an advantage beyond any egalitarian principle. But
Person?
the person being a woman being promoted because she's a woman, right?
Yes.
Okay. A woman being hired as a fireman because there is a quota of how many women there must be in the fire department, right? That individual is getting an unfair advantage.
Yes.
My contention is we are willing to make that transgression against our own rules, to let that one individual get an unfair advantage, or that set of individuals that will get it now.
Why?
to get a future goal, in the same sense that the education examples works for closed off communities. So why is that policy there? From my perspective, it's the locker room mentality. Jobs which are culturally predominantly male, yet have no reasonable justification for being all male are that because of locker room mentality.
And what
because
if they have reasonable justification?
wait. Let me just finish the thought, please. Now, I am a man, and I do get into locker rooms or locker room like situations where I am with my pals having a beer, checking out women on the street, reacting to them, noticing the tits and asses, right? And I have seen that mentality in the workplace. I have seen it in school boards. I have seen it in basically, if there's a bunch of guys locked up and sharing their lives, they will talk about sex. They will have naked girls posters or trade stories or stuff like that.
Okay.
Now, imagine being a lone woman being put into that situation.
Mm-hmm.
That woman does not merely have to contend with those with each individual man by her mental capacity or her prowess and ability. She has to contend with the sexual charge, the pressure of, oh man, now we have a pair of tits and a set of a fine ass to comment about, to make inappropriate jokes, to make advances to right. She is at a disadvantage because there's a bunch of them and there's one of her. So the only way that can be countered is if there's more than one of her. If she can have her own locker room, she can have several women with her who will help stand up for her, who will return the favor to men, who will, right? Until that locker room mentality is kind of purged from those places where it doesn't fit, those places that aren't men's locker room.
Because the adult who's being put in that job is so weak that she cannot contend with males just being what they are. Therefore, what we must do is we must take a whole bunch of them and shove them in there to break up the so-called locker room mentality.
Yeah, because the men are equally so weak that they don't recognize that they're literally abusing a colleague, that they don't see her as a colleague. Because I have worked at a women's shelter, and I have actively worked as a feminist activist, and I have seen these things, and I see them amongst friends, and I see them, right, where a woman searching for an academic career in, like, for the irony of it, at university teaching humanities, is up against a bunch of old dudes, and she is a young attractive woman, and literally every single one of them has at some point grabbed her ass, had her sent out for coffee, or, right, where her male colleagues at that level do not have to contend with that, where people several layers above her are calling her out for dinner and inviting her to their flats, and she has to consider whether that will impact her job or her career, or, right, and she's one of few, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is regularly a bunch of guys sitting reviewing resumes. Literally, I have seen this with my very own eyes and heard it with my very own ears. Literally going, no, we don't need a woman. She will just cry here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We need a man. We need somebody who's going to be tough and.
Okay. So, sorry. All right. So that was Did you fully express countering the point, countering my objections? Did you?
Countering the objection that she should be a strong person who can carry herself and deal with the opposition or the abuse to advance her own career.
Okay.
Do I understand your point, right?
More or less. My point was, uh, that affirmative action in the sense of quotas for adults. I object to this, and I would see somebody put there on merit, regardless of their sex. And to put somebody, for example, to
affirmative, just a second. Affirmative action in that respect is not ignorant of merit. It is not you shall take this many women, whichever women, right? It is you will find the women that satisfy the criteria, and you will take those.
And if there are none?
And if there are none, then there are none, and you cannot fill those positions, or they will be filled by men, right? Regardless of years of such or decades of such measures being passed, there is still huge predominance of men, even where there are such quotas in place, right?
I'm sorry, I'm not following. There
is still a male predominance in such positions, even where there are such quotas in place.
You know what's interesting is, as
the point is, you don't just put a woman there because she's a woman. No, you have to put a woman that satisfies the criteria for the job,
if she's competent. So
yeah.
So all things being equal, choose the woman.
Yeah.
All things being equal. And if things are not equal,
ideally, yes, it can go further, right? It is, hey, here's a guy who is perfect for the job, like fits it to a T. He's the best candidate we've ever had. And here is a woman who just barely crosses the bar and satisfies our criteria that we have set. There are situations where she would be more employable than him, where
more worthy of affirmative action.
Yeah, exactly.
Described it. Yeah. I would object to that. For example, take the example of the fireman, or the fire brigade. A fire brigade's job is to protect property and save lives. I don't want second best. Yet, you take something like medicine, you take something like a dentistry, where they can excel equally. Well, I say let merit win. But I have my objection. See, one of the points that I'm making, the original thing that sparked this conversation off was that social justice, which at this moment we are now referring to as the extreme left, have as an assumption that whatever the protected class is, race, sex, you name it, are weak and must be protected from the oppressors. My attitude is that the person gets what they work for. And sometimes, even though you have let's take me. Imagine that I had all the talent in the world and I wanted to be a basketball player, but I don't have the physical frame for it. There's no reason I should be in that job unless I can show that I can exceed my physical limitations to match those that surround me. Now, when it comes, for example, to dentistry, let's say that there's an office where, well, I don't know if dentists. Let's take a medical office, because governments often get involved with medicine. Let's say that you have two excellent doctors, one male, one female. The hospital is predominantly male. I say look for an extra criteria of merit. Don't just shove her in there because of what she's got between her legs. You know, if her brain is bigger and her fingers are more dexterous and her knowledge is deeper, absolutely she gets in there before the man who has a lesser quantity, but it's merit. Now, as for the boys club, you know, I've been a man all my life and I've yet to meet one of these boys clubs things. But then again, I'm in North America. So that might be slightly different.
It
But
might be.
I've yet to encounter anything like this
So
in my life.
there is a point where there could be a disparity between our literal experience of life, right?
Our cultures, sure. No, and I'm not
Living in
saying that there
Croatia,
are.
I can go to Herzegovina, to place where my grandfather was born. There is a family there that carries my last name, and I've been to visit them to see where my family kind of comes from, as far as I can see in the past. And there I encountered the situation where there is a concept of family bride. I don't know if it translates exactly
I can relate to
into
that. Yeah,
English.
a certain clannishness.
No, bride, as in bride and groom.
Oh, I thought you meant
Okay,
pride.
so
Okay, so there's a family pride.
family bride. The bride is the Croatian term for bride is nevesta, and in that part of the country, in the term is not her relationship to her husband.
Okay,
To him, she is a wife. To the rest of the family, she is a bride. She is the youngest woman in the house, and
right.
her role is to serve.
Okay,
And so we came and visited with them and talked. And the bride of the family, the youngest wife in the house,
yes, the one with the
stood
lesser
by the
children.
stove and was not allowed to talk
Okay,
until all the men left the room. When
okay,
only the women were around the table, then she could sit down at the table.
okay. That's something I could object to.
Right, and she wasn't objecting to it. We talked to her, and I was kind of allowed to slightly violate that structural setup because I'm a foreigner who doesn't understand the local custom. And okay, if she's sitting with my wife and talking and I'm there, then I'm just the weird guy who's sitting with the women and talking, right?
Sure.
But she's really happy with her life. She has found a good husband. She has finally married. She's going to have kids. She is serving her role. Like yesterday she was like, or a few months ago she was a female child, and
Yeah.
now she's a bride, and that's a position of pride and honor. She's serving the family. That's
Okay.
her role in life, right? And she feels empowered by that.
Okay.
On the other hand, looking from the outside, it's horrible. It's dehumanizing. She's basically a slave with every human dignity taken away from her.
Yes.
An adult human who is treated with as though she has no rights and only has obligations that she must fulfill.
Okay.
In Croatia, I'm constantly running into both locker room mentality and like street calling after women and stuff like that. I cannot count the times that an elder family member has come up to me and instructed me that I should beat my wife.
Okay, so I understand what you're talking about now. To use the vernacular, you would be talking about, oh no. Okay. You would be talking about gender roles. This is literally what gender roles refer to. This is what women in the 50s and in the early 60s objected to. And this is what the women's rights movement sought to change. Now, I have no problem with that. Now, the question is, can you please forgive me? I have to go close the door on my chickens.
No problem. No.
My predators. I'll be back in 60 seconds, and I'll use the time to formulate a response. Sorry about that. Just had to make sure that my hands weren't subject to predators. Okay. So what you're talking about is the abolishment of gender roles, and the idea behind that, the reason why I would support that, the example that you're giving with the brides and so on and so forth, is the notion of impartiality. The notion of impartiality before law, which is one of the basic liberal tenets. Notice, by the way, that these are women's issues. This is not feminism. So as far as ensuring that women and men have impartial, are treated impartially by law and fair in all respects that is relevant to a human being, I have no problem with that. Now, there also comes a point of, and this is kind of a difficult issue, because we could take this and we could say, well, let's look at Islam. You know, there are women out there who feel empowered by wearing the burqa. To them, it's an honor, you know. It's like this thing here. Whereas we're looking at these people and going, well, you know, it's kind of demeaning to her. And, you know, so now to go back again to the issue with the Roma. Well, affirmative action is about enabling somebody to absorb certain values, tools, mental resources, and bring them back to their community so that they can transform the community. Well, what if the community doesn't want to be transformed? This is where I apply the value of liberalism. Do what you want to do, so long as you're not harming anyone else. If you, as the bride, genuinely believe that this is your place in life and you are gratified by it, then by all means. Now, you are not hampered from listening to other people. You are not hampered from thinking. You are not hampered from independently taking power over your own life. You are not, so long as these conditions of you're allowing yourself to express your full autonomy are there, and you make this choice, well, that's your business. You get to do that. And no purple-haired woman gets to tell you that what you're doing is not okay. If you decide that as a woman, what you really want to do is you want to raise kids, no purple-haired woman gets to tell you it's bad of you to do that.
Absolutely.
The extreme left want to do this, and these are the people. These are more examples of the behavior that I reject. Now, if I remember in, I'm sorry, did you say you were in Bosnia?
Croatia, but
Croatia. Sorry,
I mentioned Herzegovina, which is why you probably. Bosnia is a tripartite country, which is 1/3 Serbian, 1/3 Bosnian, and 1/3 Croatian. And and the Croat portion is mostly Herzegovina.
Okay.
Most of Herzegovina, right?
Okay. So now, to tie this into what do I think of affirmative action? Well, I don't think that it is my duty to tell another person how to live. I don't believe that it is my right to impede upon other people's choices. I may disagree with them, but it's not my life. It's not my business. Same thing, for example, with abortion. I'm a male. I can't have an abortion. A woman might be bearing my child, but it's her body. And even though it affects me, I have no right to tell her what to do with her body. I'm blocked there. There's, you know, so you just have to respect that. But this notion of we should put people in certain positions because of a locker room mentality, my response to that is no. If you really want the job, get stronger. If you really want to build a multi-billion-dollar company, you're going to do it on your own steam. If you want to be a board member, in my mind, nothing could be more humiliating than being slipped in as the quota hire. I would not encourage this, and this I don't see how it would help performance, and I object to the assertion that diversity, in quotes, is a strength. The only diversity that I support is the diversity of a person's character, their resources, their mental resources, their strength, their point of view, their ability to think things through. Being black, being female, being gay, being this religion or that religion, just for its own sake, does not necessarily bring a value to the group unless that individual, in their character, in their mental resources, in their experience, has a specific bearing on the overall mission has an overall bearing on the mission. So when you talk about affirmative action, I do see why we might want to assist those who were deprived of education, why we might want to educate them, but not so that they can go and transform the community, but so that they can transform their own lives. And should they happen to transform their community or not, that's on them. My goal is not to transform another community, to tell them how to live.
So we're talking about social engineering, basically, right?
About what?
Social engineering.
Yeah, not big on social engineering.
I know you're not. I recognize that you're not.
Right.
I'm saying that if we're ever to reach a world in which your position would be the valid position, where we can view individuals just as human individuals, we must first correct some things that are left over and that are legacy, which are detrimental to that, right? That again, that the recipients of that affirmative action, which puts that woman in that place, is not that woman. That woman for herself.
Can you please repeat that?
That the recipient of the benefit of affirmative action, of putting that woman in that place, is not that woman.
Okay.
So she is receiving much more, and we consider that irrelevant. We will overlook the fact that she has been given more money, more opportunity, more outcome than she ever earned or deserved, right?
Okay.
In order to change the situation of existing locker room mentality in such places.
Yeah,
for the future women that will come into that place as an equal.
But what makes you think there will be future women that come into the place unless they get affirmative action too? Unless they're doing it on their own merit.
Because there is no reason why there shouldn't be. Because I don't see that there's
plenty of reasons why there shouldn't be. Think about it. Has it occurred to you that maybe some people get into certain professions merely because it's their preference, or it's within their skill level, or it's within their risk tolerance level, or
Absolutely.
it's within their education, or it's within their natural inclinations? Why should we be forcing people into situations that they cannot earn themselves if they already have these things? So now you take let's call her Alice, because it starts with the letter A. She's the first one. She gets inserted into a company. Well, how many people get affirmative action to go into that one company? What is the ratio that makes it okay to interfere with a company?
That is up to the company in response to social pressure.
So the company says, no, we're not interested. We just want the best, pure merit. But the government is saying, listen, if you don't do this, we cut you off at this. We push these.
No, we'll give support to the person who is willing to do that, right? We won't support you because you said no. We will support this other guy who said that yes, he'll do that.
So that would mean that the government is no longer impartial.
Yes.
First of all, the government isn't
Yes.
interfering. The government is no longer impartial, and you're engaging in social engineering.
Any affirmative action is a violation of impartiality.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That impartiality is a valid goal. That it is something that can work once we have an even starting playing field. That the circumstance of what you have between your legs does not affect your ability to reach that place or survive in that place.
And this is my core objection to what I refer to as social justice warriors, or in this conversation, the extreme left. This is my core objection. People are weak. You have to interfere with other people's lives to help them up, whether the people involved want it or not. You're not allowing people to flourish. You are artificially boosting them, possibly to a position of incompetence and danger. And if you don't do this, we will punish you. And, you know, excuse me, but if there's two people, there are two widget manufacturers, and the government says, well, we're going to give you a 50% tax break, and you're not getting anything, then the government has gotten into. Now you've got state management.
Yeah.
And so now we're moving away from free markets. We're moving from independence of human being. We're moving away from merit. We're moving away from the very basic tenets of liberalism. And we're moving into authoritarianism.
I don't think so. The reason why I don't think so is because there's enough of us that want it, that we are voting for it, that it is a democratically chosen course of action.
Well, you can certainly democratically vote for authoritarianism.
What?
You can certainly democratically vote for authoritarianism.
Yeah, you can. You can. The thing is that none of us, as far as I know, have the goal to maintain that indefinitely.
And, well, okay, well, here's one of my objections. How will you know when things are equal? By whose measure? Who decides that? Indefinitely? Well, how long is long enough? Especially when we know that human beings tend to go into these purity spirals. How will you determine? What are the objective criteria by which you will measure these things?
When it stops being relevant.
How will you know when that's the case? What are the measurable criteria?
The measurable criteria are reports of abuse at a workplace, reports of people quitting because they have a mental breakdown because they can no longer take the literal sexual abuse, right?
Okay. What if it's men who are saying this job is too strenuous for me, and the women are the one who are abusing me? How do we measure this?
You can ask each and every one of them why they quit, right? You can keep track of why they quit. You can keep track of trends of why people are leaving their jobs.
Okay, so now we're measuring every single company in the world as to why things,
you know as well as I do. Like if you make it a categorical imperative, then yes, it falls apart.
Yeah,
we don't measure things like that. We measure them through statistics, right?
Okay. So
you ask people to volunteer that information. Based on people volunteering that information, you infer a conclusion. Those are social studies.
And how do we account for the discrepancy just between people being what they are? You know, I'll never be 7 feet tall. I'll never be able to lift 500 pounds. I'll never be able to run like a cheetah. How do you account for the differences in human beings? Period. See, one of the things is that now we're getting into calculations that are so unbelievably complex that no management system can ever deal with this. And this is the very basis of why I adopt a liberal point of view, is that my point of view is that every individual should build their life, be strong, manage the best that they can, and I can understand the occasional hand up to somebody, but not to the point where we start interfering with those who don't want to be interfered with. There's a difference between somebody saying, yes, I will accept your help to better myself, and you shall do this, or
I
punishment.
I agree to a large portion. So I'm trying to argue a position. So I'm very one-sided in arguing. I do
Don't be.
recognize what.
Don't be. You can argue both sides, or no. This is a conversation.
I'm trying to get a point across. So I'm arguing one
All right,
side, right?
Okay.
I'm defending the position as best I can. I don't hold that position that rigorously, and I am aware of those problems. I am aware that humanist sciences, especially social sciences, are not up to par with what we're trying to do.
Okay.
And what we want to do. They still have a lot of quackery in them, still have a lot of, but this is how we get them better.
How do you know?
By making mistakes, right? If we're only going to play it safe, if we're never going to do anything wrong, if we're never going to take any risks, if we're never going to do any social experiments and see what the outcomes are, we are not going to learn how to solve that problem. And there is at the moment a will to kind of give the killing blow to the problem and say, look, there's enough people interested in this, fervent about this, that we can right now set these marks and push this through and achieve the knowledge that can later be used to
Okay.
make a truly liberal, equal society.
I will not argue against people trying things. And in fact, you sold me on. I got to get used to looking at the camera here.
Yeah, likewise. I keep looking at your eyes, which are there.
Sorry, that's where the monitor is.
Yeah.
I have no problem with people trying things out. And, it's like you really sold me on a bit of, well, we should let people try. I have no problem letting people try. What I have a problem with, and let me think, I have an objection that I haven't quite formulated in my mind yet. I'm okay with people trying things. I'm okay when it works, but it has to be collaborative. It has to be desired by both parties. And it seems to me that if it were desired by both parties, companies would willingly take on women on their boardrooms merely because they're women. And some do.
Companies do.
And some do. And for some, it's a success. And for others, it isn't. The objection that I have is the external imposition of a government. That would be my primary objection. The government should never meddle with companies, or it should meddle with them the least amount possible, because never is a bad choice of words. I can accept that people want to push for their favorite idea. I have no problem with that. That's absolutely fine. Well, it's free speech.
And they can vote for that idea.
Right? And they can vote for that idea. I have no problem with that. I, however, also have the right to speak against the ideas.
Absolutely.
What I don't have is the power to shove a man into an all-women's board, for example, or I don't have.
And you don't have it because there is no collective will for that, because there is no perceived problem there, because men are not underrepresented, nor do they have difficulty.
Well, they are in some trades.
Fair enough.
If you look at nurses, why aren't we forcing more men to go into nursing? You know, it's like, where's the government mandate? I haven't seen it. You know, why aren't we forcing women to why aren't we quotaing women into sewage teams? Or,
No, I absolutely agree with that argument. Yeah.
Notice that a lot of what the government is inserting at the popular demand of a certain political faction is that women are inserted into high status positions regardless of merit, as opposed to all positions equally. I have a cousin. She drives a garbage truck for a living. She's like one of, I don't know, 320. I'm just making the number up. But, you know, there are very few women garbage drivers. I'm sure they're out there. My cousin's one of them.
And I absolutely agree with that point. And I would say that, yes, that is a failure of kind of the feminist movement, and that
we'll call them
the extreme left, that they are very vocal about the prominent desirable positions.
Yes.
And very ignoring the inequality at the other end, the part that men's rights activists are kind of bringing up. Hey, all the most dangerous and the most dirty and low income jobs are done by men. Like the disparity is equally evident at the lower end of the jobs as it is on the higher. Right?
Yeah.
And I agree with that. It is. And the same, like, if what I'm saying, if my understanding of the policies and why they are implemented are right, those same quotas should exist for the low paying jobs as well. You should have equal amounts or quoted amounts of garbage disposal women and sewage cleaning women, and right.
And will they be accepted
for the same break up the locker room cause and reason that I stated?
Okay, so we also get to break up women's locker rooms, right?
Presumably, yes.
Okay, well, then we're aiming towards impartiality, but we already have a mechanism for that. That's called merit. People working hard to get to where they want to be. You know, guys who are doing garbage collection, sludge, it's a praiseworthy job. They're doing good. It's dangerous. It's hard, but it's not the most sought after job. And but you know, I'm sure it pays reasonably well. I don't actually know what it pays, but you don't see a lot of women going out there and saying, well, do you know what? I'm going to give up this waitress job, and on my own steam, I'm going to become a sewage cleaner. And so the point that I'm making is that a lot of times what you call locker room mentalities really are not locker room mentalities as much as they are.
I'm not saying that it's something deliberate or evil. I'm saying that that's something that kind of naturally occurs in a situation where there is a community of all men all day long hanging around men.
But why all men? Why not all people? Shall you artificially insert white people into black people's groups?
No, women also have their own locker room mentality.
Okay.
Right.
So why are we inserting some people into some groups, but not others into other groups?
So let's take the example of nurses, right?
Okay.
Predominantly female job. They do have their locker room mentality, of women hanging out with women and
Right.
I know male nurses, and when they go there, they just join in the locker room mentality that is already there. They do not get abused. They do not get like right. There is no expectation of them to sexually interact with their colleagues, or there isn't.
You know this? How?
Yes, as I said, from personal knowledge of people who are male nurses,
All right.
I know two of them.
Okay.
I've never heard them express anything even remotely like that.
Okay. Do they talk about being nattered at and henpecked, and do they talk about petty office quarrels and?
Yes.
I do,
Yes.
that's the female. That's the female locker room. Women.
I'm sorry, those things are not comparable. Right? Being henpecked, being mothered, being is not the same as being grabbed by the ass and asked out.
Henpecked is another word for mental abuse, social abuse, reputational abuse.
Yes, and so I don't see henpecking as a female activity. I do see it as a universal human thing, except that when a male boss does it to me, then I call it mobbing.
You call it mobbing?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm not quite following what you're saying. When
a guy does when a guy henpecks me,
yes,
that's mobbing. That's
why
the same thing is called a different term if a guy does it, right?
Yeah,
but
why?
guys do it normally and equally as well. Okay, maybe I'm confusing the terms. What do you mean by henpecking?
By henpecking is men compete for social status through merit and aggression, outright physical aggression, outright verbal aggression. Women compete for status and dominance through the means of relationship, of rumor, of snide remarks, of their way of dealing with their natural human aggression is more indirect than men. Myself, having worked in a group of people with almost exclusively women, can tell you that, first of all, sexual advances are not unique to men, and that there is a different. I'm going to use a word that I don't know if it translates well. There's a certain kind of cattiness that women can bring that creates tensions just as high for someone as something else may. I believe that men and women are both animals. We both have aggression. We both have foibles as well as their flaws, and we merely express them differently. What I object to is pointing to only one side of the fence and saying, well, this is bad, but this we will ignore. All the women get the high positions, but we ignore the low positions. There's an imbalance in this. And then you follow up saying, well, the government should have the right to interfere with this. My preference, my approach is let people work it out themselves. And if you constantly have a parent who's holding your hand, you will never get strong enough to be where you want and can be. And the minute that we bring in collective power to force and shape people into something that they don't explicitly request or desire, I see as a form of authoritarianism, which is the inverse of liberalism.
Fair enough. So one part that might be worthy of notice in that is that the contention about the good jobs, the board places, is that there is equal desire by both sexes to get there, right? Where there is, it's not necessarily so. It's not necessarily so. There is the case of women predominantly not choosing career, not choosing to fight for their job, seeking family enabling jobs and life quality jobs and stuff like that, right? I am aware and accept that. I'm not contending with that. I'm speaking that amongst career seeking men and career seeking women, there is equal desire to get to those positions,
Okay.
right? And that is disproportionate in outcome, and that women burn out faster, and that I am very unconvinced by the statement that burnout is due to them being emotional, hormonal women who just burn out because they're women,
Yeah.
right?
We don't know why an individual will burn out.
Yeah. I would say my notion from what I've seen is that they experience an undue pressure.
Okay.
Above and beyond the stress of such a position already incurs, or reaching such a position already incurs.
Is it possible that they might be more sensitive to it?
That's exactly what I just said. I don't think so, right?
Okay.
My notion is that
We
it
know.
cannot possibly be a
Why not?
difference between, because I don't see that women are that weak, because I see them dealing with horrendous things and things that I don't think I could bear on everyday basis. That if you are looking for strength, you might find it in men, but if you are looking for endurance and perseverance, you will find it more predominantly in women, right?
Well, now we're arguing temperaments.
Yeah,
and that's okay. But other than my ordinary human heuristics, I haven't done the study of temperaments well enough to know. From what I understand, the in psychology, there's something known as the big five traits, which those were derived statistically. That might be one way of verifying this, but without that knowledge, I'm not willing to make a claim on it. But it might be fruitful investigating. But I want to get back to, not get back, I want to return for a moment and further explain an illustration of how I perceive the world. A body is made, a human physical body is made up of, I think, trillions of cells, many, many cells. I don't know what the number is. My notion of society as society is as a body, and in order for it to be healthy, every cell should operate to its maximum capacity, its maximum healthy capacity. When every cell in the body is healthy, or when the greater amount of cells in a body are healthy than less ones, then the body is strong. And you cannot have a strong body if all the cells are weak, or if the majority of the cells are weak. When the majority of the cells are weak, we call that being ill. I see society in the same way. And if we take people who aren't necessarily best suited for the position, or we give them a special chance, I don't see how this helps the body, because you're taking what is inherently a weak cell and putting it there. Now, again, I'll repeat this for the last time, because just for fear that we might be going in circles. I don't know if we are, but I don't want to. I believe in helping people who want to provide them with what it takes to shape themselves into the strongest cell possible. What I disagree with is taking let's say, a muscle cell and injecting it into the liver and expecting it to work well. A muscle cell does one thing. It tightens and it relaxes. Liver cells do different things. I think that when we are the maximum of what it is that we are naturally, that is the best way that we can help society overall. Some of the things that are within our control, within our power, is the formation and development of our minds, of learning how to think. And one must learn how to think as much as an athlete must learn their sport or how to dance. We must develop our character to whatever maximum we can. If all of us are strong and upright, then, and I think we can work all of this out without having busybodies telling somebody else how they should be doing their thing, commanding under compulsion that you shall accept this thing. And it boils down to the concept of liberty at will, liberty in the end. It's, are we flourishing? In order for society to flourish, every individual must flourish. That's why I say, if you want to give people a chance to educate themselves who want it, who may not have had the benefit from it, that I have no problem with. But I do not perceive injecting a foreigner into some company as as supporting human flourishing.
So it's again the difference between. Sorry, there's an. I can hear myself. No, it's gone. That's strange. That's happened a couple of times now. But
technical note: maybe there's a delay in the microphone and the speakers.
Yeah, and when that happens, I can hear myself. But most of the time, it's excluding my voice. Never mind. What I was going to say was there is an element of existing inequality, of persistent inequality, which does not remove itself, right? That is ingrained in the balance of things as they are now. What social justice is trying to do is shake up that, make that unstable to the point of maybe settling down to a position of better equality, of having more of what you're seeking for my children's children.
I think the connection that you and I both share in this is that we agree with the overall goal.
Yes, absolutely.
What I disagree with are the means.
Yeah, you from what I see of what you're saying is that it is imperative that we do it now for the people who live now under the circumstances that exist now. Right?
Yeah.
That we can that at this moment in time we can recognize each individual as an individual and treat each individual as an individual and have a meritocracy as everything stands now. And my perception
work towards a meritocracy that will always be in progress.
And my perception of that is that it has the same flaw as free market, that those that are in power now have the advantage of having that power now, and that those that are disenfranchised literally, like, they don't have to do as much to gain an equal start to begin with. They have to do twice as much, right?
I understand what you're saying.
And that built-in inequality is something that needs to be corrected, and that leaving the system, like approaching it your way, as virtuous as it is, will not address that ever.
And
Because
interestingly enough, I don't believe that yours will either, and it'll go the wrong way. But let me see now. What you're bringing up is the argument of privilege, and so allow me just a moment to formulate my thoughts on this here, because there might be some, there's something fruitful we can bring up. I'm gonna to use a buzzword that I really don't like, but that's important to do, to steelman your position. The best visual representation I've seen of this was an image of racers around the track, you know, people who run, that some are held back, and no matter how good they are, they'll never catch up to the ones who were put in front of them. And it doesn't matter how much how meritorious they may be, that they will never be able to catch up because certain people just have an unfair advantage. When social justice warriors and feminists use the word privilege, what they most frequently fail to do is to include the adjective before the noun, and that's unearned privilege. A privilege is an advantage that is granted to someone for one reason or another. For example, in a corporation, the officers of the company may have their own private bathroom. That is a privilege that is due to them. It is an advantage.
I don't think anybody is objecting to earned privilege.
Okay. Oh, trust me, they are. And these are amongst the
no, fair enough. Yeah,
okay.
Those
So
people that are supposedly on my side that I would like not to be.
yeah, the extreme left.
Yeah.
Let's put these loonies in their box, and you know the rest of us get to work things out. So now there's a couple of things. One, how and where people are born is random. Nothing is fairer than randomness, because randomness doesn't care. Some will be born high, some will be low. Our instincts as a species, because we're always comparing, we're a social species, we're always comparing ourselves to each other. One of the things that there's an article that I read somewhere where they're talking about one of the things that causes resentment between people is the resentment is to their proximate neighbor. So your neighbor gets a brand new truck and you're jealous of the neighbor, yet you're not jealous of the queen. Why? Because she's in another country and your neighbor is next to you. And this is one of the things that evokes a sense of injustice, of unfairness. Allow me to continue here. I got like two more points that I have to sort of string out here. Yeah. So one was I wanted to clarify the distinction between privilege and unearned privilege. I wanted to define that privilege is in fact merely the proper word to use is advantage. And so if we're talking about unearned advantage and advantage, well, life is random. There will always be a discrepancy. Life, the universe, biology, physics dictates that there will always be an advantage, an imbalance of advantages. But also notice that advantage is not a cumulative thing. Somebody might have excellent memory skills, but not be in a place where they can play cards. Or what I'm saying is that we should not look at advantage as a cumulative point total where everyone must have exactly the same points in exactly the same places. This will never happen. In fact, even as a whole, we cannot. Different languages convey different concepts. Shall we force people to learn all the same languages? In the end, if one attempts to if one attempts to regulate reality, we don't have the brains to regulate reality. We are best as individuals being responsive to our nearest environment and to maximize ourselves within that given environment. This is our greatest chance of raising the whole. The communists and the socialists would tell you, no, 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 no. We've got brains big enough. We can run an economy. Well, look at what socialism has given us. Look at what communism has given us. We don't have the brains for it individually to manage a society. Our brains can't handle it. What our brains can do is respond to our nearest environment so that the well-being becomes an emergent property of independent, of personal development, of developing our minds, of developing our character, of developing our social skills, our courtesy, our willingness and ability to collaborate. I believe that this, over a period of time, stands a greater chance, and that what you can do is promote values, but you can't force them on people. You can promote the ability to think skeptically. You can give people the skills and the resources. Here's how to eliminate 10 fallacies from your thinking in 30 days. Not everybody will have the drive to do this. Not everybody wants to improve their character. This is a fact of life. There will always be inequality, and therefore to fight inequality is unrealistic, and it wastes our time where we could be developing ourselves and helping our family and helping our friends.
So yes, to a point.
And no.
Yes and no, yeah. One thing we have is networking through language.
Yes.
We can share cognitive tasks. We can solve little parts and little bits and offload other bits on other people. That's and nice. Cooperate to solve problems that no mind can solve individually.
Be one cell in the global mind, if you will.
Exactly.
Okay.
And another thing is that all of the technological problems that we have solved in the last 100 years were unsolvable at any point in history before that, until a critical mass of information, knowledge, ability, networking, communication all came together to suddenly bring about a revolution in first industry, then in, right?
Yes.
In technology, in communication, in culminating in the internet and smartphones and whatever comes next.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The notion is that socialism is that very same thing. That our initial ideas with Marx and with Hegel's and with Lenin were equivalent to physics 200 or 300 years ago, where we had the first bright ideas that we tried out, and some of them worked and some of them didn't, and we went about it the completely wrong way and concluded that there is stuff like phlogiston and ether and those things got corrected by observation, by interacting with those concepts, by trying out new things on them until it was shown what is correct and what is not. But had we not done it, had we not committed those mistakes, there is no mental process, there is no genius that could come about that could look at the problem and solve it. There is no Einstein that would be possible if there wasn't a theory of ether before him and the theory of phlogiston before him.
But there are some things that are just wrong.
What?
But there are also some things that are just wrong. Millions of people dead is not the same level of injustice as a black person not getting into Harvard.
Oh, yes. So my notion is that I was born in a communist country, right?
Yes.
I grew up in a communist country until it fell apart.
Right.
Communism is the wrong way to do it, right? Communism is from my understanding of it. It's trying to bring about socialism by the shortest possible route.
It's the other way around. Socialism is trying to bring about communism.
Wrong. That's very wrong. So, well, maybe it's not, but it's very wrong from my understanding.
Okay, well, just let's do a little sidebar. Tell me more about it.
Okay.
Conversation in a minute, but give me this bit.
The goal of socialism is that every person in a society has its needs met. That the means of production, that everything that gets produced is owned by the society at large, not by any individual, right?
Right.
And that there is an equality, that every man should get as much as he needs, because we will bring about as a non-zero sum game where everybody can win. Those are the ideals, the ultimate goal of socialism. Star Trek, right? The Star Trek universe.
Okay, and how are you different from communism?
Communism is a way of reaching that by direct revolution. Take a benevolent ruler, absolute ruler, give him absolute rule to bring this about in as few steps as possible. Right? Why communism doesn't work is because it's a goal-oriented problem solving. Here is the goal. What steps can possibly lead there? These are the steps, without ever asking where else could those steps lead, right? And then you find yourself saying, okay, well, it's possible that I install a benevolent ruler, he puts in these policies, we get an intermediate state, and then end up in the ideal socialism. And then we can disband the ruler because his job is done. Failing to see that if you put a person in that position, there is no reason for him to remain benevolent. And what Soviet Russia or what Yugoslavia were not communism, were not were not that path. They were the first step to that path. Install an authoritarian ruler with absolute power. And then he goes, okay, and now we're going to forget about everything else because I have everything that I ever wanted out of this.
Okay, my understanding basically is that socialism is that what you described as socialism, I understand as the ultimate goal of communism. And
that's the ultimate goal. Socialism is the ultimate goal of communism.
Right, and that socialism as we know it is the slow path to communism. To that ultimate goal.
Socialism is the ultimate goal of the philosophy, of the political philosophy, of the economic philosophy, right? Communism is one possible way to reach it. I think by shortest distance.
Okay.
Social democracy and democratic socialism are the longer
right
to it.
Right. Social democracy is. Do you know what? I have to look that up again. Okay, so I get the general sense. So let's put that sidebar apart. Let's put the sidebar back. Let's go on where we were discussing. The conversation we were having just before that sidebar was privilege. We were talking about privilege. We were talking about inequality, the emergent mind.
Oh yeah, the networking among people, communicating, solving problems, where we have solved all these problems of technology, and what some of us are trying to do is solve the problem of socialism, to find the way in which what form of socialism, of that end game socialism, do we want to achieve, where I am a Democrat socialist, or well, one of those two, where I want free market for production, but I don't see any other way of achieving it except having a planned economy to a degree. Not a planned, but a well-regulated economy.
You're talking about a mixed market.
Yeah.
That's what we've got right now.
Yeah. And I think we are on a good path. I think the Western civilization, as it is now, with multiculturalism, with globalism, with social justice fires and misfires, with everything that is now, is the perfect step we should be taking right now, which is being torn apart by the extremes to such a measure that like the resistance to what we actually are doing, which I think is correct, is staggering.
Well, I will agree with you in the following way. Liberalism is a tool that liberalism is derived from humanism.
Mm-hmm.
Humanism is derived from individualism. Individualism is derived from eudaimonianism, that is, human flourishing. Our goal always points back to human flourishing. Results have shown us that we are flourishing quite well in many ways. Now, the flourishing is imperfect, and it will always be imperfect until the end of time. You and I both seem to agree mostly on liberal principles. Our disagreement seems to lie in what we think the best means to get there are. We both discard the extreme leftists. And so I suppose really what our discussion, the greatest point of our contentions will be around determining short-term goals and means. Eudaimonia, human flourishing, is very vague. What does it even mean? We can only look so far into the future. We can never see perfection. I think that one of the things that we should do is avoid utopianism. That is the belief in a perfect world.
Yeah.
Or that it is even achievable. I think that we would do best if we started with our feet on the ground, recognizing, first of all, the conditions. People will never be equal. People will never achieve equal outcomes. There will always be inequality. This is built into the construct of reality in our very bodies themselves. Even our social senses are often contradictory to each other. So I don't think we can, I don't think that we have a better system, given the flaws of the creatures that we are, than what we currently have. One of the reasons that I object, I may object to many of the specific arguments that that the extreme left will make. I may object to their goals, but the overall objection that I have in the direction that it's taking is that it is like a corrosive acid that is eating at the bones of true liberalism, to the point where they will argue against sexism, against racism, against this and that. But in the name of tolerance, they will permit us to reject our own values, to bring people who do not want to integrate, who reject our values, and who have a directly opposing authoritarian system. And so in the name of tolerance, the sheep invites the wolf in. And so Islam is one pressure, communism is another pressure, and because our feet are not on the ground, we are losing sight of where we currently are and what our next few steps should be. And so what we're doing is having Twitter wars rather than individually taking responsibility for being a good neighbor, for being a good coworker, for being a good family member, for all these things. There is an absolute rejection of all previous values, whether they were bad, but also the rejection of the good previous values. And I'm not making an appeal to tradition. I'm making an appeal to looking at what has been proven to bring us here. Things such as science and skepticism have brought us medicine, but it's also moved us away from religion. But it turns out that humans, a lot of humans seem to have that component where they need a religion. And so they reject one, but they accept another. And the problem is that we are inconsistent as creatures. And what the extreme left right now is doing is basically shoving a stick in the weak points and tearing it apart. That, if I had to say what my personal objection to all of this, beyond all the very specifics, the grander objection would be this. How do you respond to that?
I agree with it. I dislike it. I have a visceral. So the term is regressive left, right?
Sure.
And
the regressive left.
I would classify regressive left as conservative, as odd as that sounds, as opposed to progressive left, right? In the sense that they have gained some ground, and they're trying to use the ground that has been gained on the left on progressing forward to such an extent that they want to cement it and say these are the values and we will not let go of any of them, and we'll, right?
Point.
So it's not ancient traditionalism, it's recent traditionalism. So the values of the 50s and the 60s are getting reinforced and sanctified instead of looking forward at what we are trying to accomplish and what we should be accomplishing and what we have tried to accomplish in emancipating women, in equal human rights, in right. And they are doing it by the means of the extreme right. When you one of the objections that I have to the extreme left is that they are pro-segregationists, that they really do, when you listen to them speak, when you listen to the points they make, they want this race to be treated differently. They want this sex to be treated differently, right? You need to watch what you're saying in front of a woman. You're not allowed to think openly, right? That's regressive. That's segregationist. That makes women into a different class of being from men.
And
we're all humans. And that makes blacks a different class of than no. We're all human.
Well, what I find interesting about that is, in a sense, I kind of agree with some of what you're saying, is in a sense that though they believe themselves to be rebels, they are in fact not rebellious, they are not forward-looking, and while the content of what they say is different, the structure of two previous generations is the same. You know, a lot of this came from the beatniks and the hippies, who thought that they were rebelling against the previous generation. And the previous generation had, you know, Women had to be protected. That's why they were kept in the home, because that's where it was safe. Well, after the Industrial Revolution in cities, well, it was safe enough, and there was enough electricity, and there was enough cars that women could eschew a lot of, could take on roles that were ordinarily done by men because it required physical strength. Cars and electricity replaced that. So they started venturing out into the world, and there was a tension for a while. Well, tradition has it that you should stay out here and I should go out and do battle with the marketplace. And this is what the next generation was objecting to. No, women should be able to do anything because we're strong and we're independent. Yet this generation is treating women like they're weak.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so my original argument, one of my big beefs with social justice is we are treating certain people like weak. Black people have a certain class. They're not smart enough to go to Harvard. They're not smart enough to be president of the United States. We have to treat them specially. You know, women are no longer told to stay in the kitchen. They're told to stay in the career, whether they like it or not, because if you don't, you are screwing over the sisterhood. So I really get that cyclical thing that you're talking about. I wish I could articulate it better. But we're agreeing. I'm just trying to kind of like amplify what we're agreeing on.
Yeah. One part of what I'm saying is that what you're saying about the extreme left, I see it in American news, in American media, in American alt-right and British alt-right channels and libertarian channel and or libertarian channel. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm misusing the alt-right term.
All right, what do you mean when you use alt-right?
No, I meant to say libertarian and okay. And went.
We'll distinguish that later. Okay, just let's get it up.
Okay, Sargonovacan.
He's not right.
He's not alt-right. That's why I corrected myself. That's why I said libertarian. Right? The people who are attacking the extreme left. Let's put it that way.
But that's me.
I know.
And I'm saying, and we agree. That means you're alt-right.
That's me as well. Yeah.
How about I give you a definition of
alt-right? Wait. Let me just finish the statement because I sidetracked myself with misusing a term.
Go ahead.
But I'm not seeing that in any of the communities or the circles that I frequent, even though they're pretty far out left people who would call themselves communists, anarcho-communists, Antifa, right? Who regularly protest and want to bring down governments and who use terms such as toxic patriarchy or toxic masculinity, and right. I frequent those circles, yet I don't see those people there, right? That extreme left that we're talking about, I see it in the news from American campuses. I have seen it in the A+ movement, in the skeptic atheist, right? When A+ started, for me that was the first moment I saw the Western SJW regressive left in action, right?
Okay.
But I don't see it in real life, right? The feminist movement that I'm in, the abused women houses, the people I interact with, which proclaim themselves to be left, which, as I said, which proclaim themselves to be Antifa, which proclaim that I don't see that. I see people who agree with me, right? In many of these points, I don't have an opportunity to get into an argument with them because none of them want to bring about that thing, because people are working to empower women, not to proclaim them victims and then glorify them as victims, right? That is something to be shunned. If you call yourself a victim, that is expressing your weakness.
Yes.
Fuck you, you're not a victim. You're not a victim. You are a human being. You are a strong, powerful. Go fight. Yeah.
But that's not what. Okay, I suspect that what I'm hearing you say, I'm trying to. You speak to a number of people who use a number of labels, yet they do not adopt some of the positions that we're discussing. You haven't had the chance to talk them through it. Like this, you got to admit, this conversation's fairly involved, and it's actually. By the way, I find this a really good conversation. We're moving forward, and we're not getting sidetracked a lot. I would suggest that maybe what's happening is that either they don't understand the labels that they're using. They have a bunch. This happens a lot. People will say, I recognize these 3 or 4 positions in myself, and this label here has the same 3 or 4 positions. Therefore, I adopt everything that this label have by calling myself whatever. As opposed to recognizing, well, I can have 3 positions of this and 2 of those and none of that one and 6 of these. When I refer to myself as centrist, that's sort of what I mean. And I suspect that the amount of agreement that we're getting, if your kind of conversations are similar to the kind of conversations that we're having, that they would not technically they would not technically adopt the positions that are usually attributed to a given label: feminist, Antifa, communist, whatever these things are. And I just lost my train of thought. I would be curious to see if you had this kind of conversation with them, if you could winnow out what the very specific and precise positions are, then it would be interesting to see if it matches what the actual criteria that make up a label are. That would interest me.
I'm fairly certain I can represent them for myself, but yeah,
But you also can't speak for another. I understand that.
Yeah, that's the part where
yeah,
I'm willing for the purposes of the conversation to accept that left actually exists and is relevant,
right?
Because maybe in America it is, right? I do see the example of Anita Sarkeesian or the red-haired lady, or right?
Yeah. I actually lived with those kind of people.
I'm sorry that's borderline insane for me, but I would say that even in their own circles, they're cooks, right? There are people who will chant stuff like communism is good. There are people who will who will wear T-shirts. I don't know. I bathe in
male tears.
In male tears or stuff like that, right? My perspective on those is that those are points of rhetoric taken too far. They're the same. Like the illness there is the illness which is shared on the left, on the right, and on the center in liberal and libertarian and all other circles, which is trolling. Oh, you find this to be holy or sacred or scary, or right? And I find it so insignificant that I can take piss out of it, right?
So
therefore
people are in fact merely doing this to elicit a response from the general public.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, most of the ones I've met are dead sincere. Now, they may be confused, uneducated, unthoughtful. They may be young. They may be driven by passion, as we were talking about earlier in the discussion. But these people are sincere. But even a drunk can be sincere in their emotion of the moment. and I claim that they're more like that than there may certainly be amongst the population trolls, piss takers, shit posters, as you might want to call them. But my experience of having lived with them, they were dead sincere.
Again, like in that case, you simply live in a different world from mine.
Very possibly.
Right.
This is.
I'm not saying that those people don't exist. I just literally cannot imagine them being the majority. Though I do see people. Even here, I see those friends of mine, those people that I associate with, being leveled with and labeled with the same criticism from the opposition that I see leveled against the extreme left there. Like,
just see if I'm understanding you. Are you saying that your friends who have a totally different political position, or at least intensity of position, than those in North America and in England and so on and so forth, are attributed the same labels?
Not only the same labels, but the same criticisms. Oh, you want to bring communism back? You're nostalgic.
Do your friends want to bring communism back?
Huh? Oh, okay, some of them do.
Identify as communist.
I don't think that anybody wants to bring communism back, in the same sense that I don't think that anybody, like, yes, there are extreme idiots who do, in the same sense that there are extreme actual Nazis who want to bring about the Fourth Reich. Right?
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand a point that you made a little bit earlier. You said, my friends, amongst my friends,
will call themselves anarcho-communists, some of them, but that's the point, right? Yeah.
And so they call themselves this. And you're saying also in North America, there are people who call themselves anarcho-communists and so on and so forth. And that while those people labeled with those positions, because they both hold the same label, they both get the same criticisms, even though their thought patterns are divergent enough to be considered not the same. Is that what you're saying?
Not exactly. I'm saying that from my perspective, it seems that those people in North America are also being maligned in the same way that these people that I hang out with are maligned. And that it's partially their own fault because they are trolls. Because they will do excessive things to get attention, because they will say things which they don't really care about to elicit a response and a reaction, because they indulge in that moment of, oh, look how powerful and free I am to use this phrase or use this term or say this unkosher thing and get you completely riled up and angry. And it means nothing to me, right? It's just something in the same sense that again, an alt-right guy might say, "Oh, we should kill all Muslims," even though he doesn't actually want to commit genocide, or right?
Okay.
Repost.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure I understood the point of it, but it might come to me a little bit later. But I understand what I think I understand what you're saying.
The point is simply that my personal perspective. I cannot say, because I'm not there. I haven't lived with those people that you have lived with.
Right.
I'm not at an American campus. I live in Croatia. So it might be different. It's just that I see people with the same labels espousing the same message, like what I have expressed here: pro affirmative action, pro empowerment, pro socialism, pro government interference, pro globalism, all of that get leveled with the same criticism from the opposition of being victim idolizers, of being segregationists, of being right.
I understand what you're saying.
The same criticism is apparent on both sides, except here I have the inside view, And those are not the things that the criticism level against them are not the positions they hold, are not what they are doing, are not what they are fighting for. Nobody wants to install the next Stalin. Nobody wants to destroy all markets, and even the most extreme anarchists don't want to just burn all the money and say we're not going to use money anymore.
Right. Are you saying that there's a difference between their cognitive beliefs and their performative beliefs? Or are you saying that these aren't legitimately cognitive beliefs that they have, that it's just a fun way to pass the time, so to speak?
I'm saying that those are not their beliefs to
Okay.
begin with.
Okay. And so
They overexpress themselves in order to shock and awe, that they misspeak because some of them are idiots, where regularly what happens is somebody misspeaks because he's an idiot, and that gets taken as, aha, now their true agenda has come true and they're all like that, right?
yeah, well, there's that element too. You know, yeah, there's that element too. I understand that, and that's part of what I call the human condition.
Yeah.
These are to be distinguished from the people who very specifically will take a certain government job, a certain academic job, a certain job in the media for the purpose of advancing an ideology. These are just yammerheads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those yammerheads get unprecedented coverage.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's really interesting to watch somebody be that stupid.
Or I'm sure fun to behave that stupidly without understanding the full consequences.
Exactly. And that's what I mean by trolling.
Yeah.
You get all the attention, you get, right? And you're kind of too dumb to see that you're doing it.
Hurting your own cause.
Yeah.
You're hurting your own best intentions.
Yes.
I'm sure there are a lot of people like that.
Yes.
Well, I think that one of some immediate solutions come to mind. One is having conversations like we're having, where we sort of dig into things and go, when you use that word, what do you really mean? And you dig into it, and suddenly you realize that, well, wait a minute here, you're not actually an anarcho-communist. You're this. The fact that you adopt 3 positions that are global to 32 labels doesn't mean that you're this particular one, even though you like the image of it.
So there's one effect which comes about that I've heard expressed explicitly by people, which is anchoring. Right?
Yes.
Oh, this is a political negotiation, right? It will land somewhere in the middle. But if I start off from here, then the middle will be closer to me. But the thing is that it seems to be that both sides are doing that to such an extent that there is no longer a middle to be reached, that there is no longer an overlap, that both sides like anchor their negotiation positions so far from each other that the only conclusion is there is no negotiation going on. This is war.
Yeah, I would understand that term as digging in. Yes, that's a problem that we have. That's a problem that we have too. So you know what? It's like, if we review some of this conversation, mostly we agree. I think once we figure out what we mean when we use certain words, we are mostly in agreement. There were a few means that we disagreed with. What did we cover? We covered a lot.
We covered a lot.
Yeah, I'm not going to do a recap of the whole thing right now. Are there any other strawmen that you want to address? And I got to keep remembering to look in the camera.
Yeah, fair enough. One thing that was touched upon that I don't think we have actually covered is privilege. You expressed the position of circumstance and chance not being influenceable. And I would just like to shortly respond to that.
Not being uninfluenceable, but being
unavoidable.
A base characteristic of life. Yes, unavoidable.
So in the extreme example, you can get hit by lightning.
Yes.
And everybody at that moment who is not being hit by lightning
has
the privilege of not being hit by lightning.
Yeah.
Right?
They have an advantage. Let's use the word advantage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I began with using the word advantage. And
the reason I do that is to specifically remove jargon, because words are mental traps.
Yes.
That carry baggage. So
let's talk about meaning.
Yeah, let's talk about the meaning. So when we use words that are closer to the meaning that we intend, we can keep the conversation a little bit cleaner in that way. So yes, okay. So
in
inherent advantage in 50,000 different factors.
So I agree that it is not imaginable or feasible to remove all of them. That some layer of chance will always be there and will always create an inherent disadvantage.
Yes.
However, I think it is almost imperative that we identify all those instances where we can remove that disadvantage, that imbalance in advantage and disadvantage is unfair from a libertarian or egalitarian position. That if it can be identified, if a source can be found, and if it can be acted upon to remove it as not as an outcome, but as an what is it, the baseline, the starting position, the opportunity, right? That we actually have an obligation to do so.
Okay, well, I think we've already done tremendously well. We are no longer serfs, and kings and queens no longer hold the power of our lives, mostly, and at least in Western society. So now, so this brings us to the next question. We've solved all of this, and now saying, well, look, there's this left. It's our imperative. It's our duty to take care of this. Okay, well, let's say there is. I'll grant you that. I'm sure there's lots of places we can do better. So we reduce it to this, and then to this. At what point? What is the final point, the measuring point, where we go, okay, guys, good job, we done it?
Since we kind of agreed that the perfect world is impossible, I don't think that we ever do. We just change what our goals are and what our obstacles are. We keep progressing.
But see, that's the point. As soon as you've achieved a goal, you want to reach for another one. And unlike humans that have a finite lifespan of 100 to max 120 years old, generally speaking, societies live on for thousands of years, and even longer if you consider that societies are born of the bones of previous societies.
Yeah.
When is enough enough?
Never. Why should we ever stop striving for more? Why should we not be ambitious? Why shouldn't we not seek to leave the world a better place than we found it?
Okay, but if we constantly have shifting goals and shifting definitions, this by definition means that we don't have a goal, that we don't have an end state, because with every end state, if you redefine and find a new goal, you're assuming that it will continue on in some perfect straight line towards absolute flourishing, until you get the unreachable goal. The closer you get to the more you move forward, the further you get from utopia. And the problem is that if people keep striving for this utopia without an end goal in the domain of inequality, this is where conflict is born. And this is, I believe, one of the current situations that we currently are facing in the Western world. We've done so much that's so amazing. Almost nobody you know has been attacked by a bear, a lion, or a tiger nearby their house. Our life has become so unbelievably comfortable that we are arguing about abstractions. Gender identity, for example, is causing rifts between people. Yet,
It's silly
what's silly?
that gender identity is causing rifts among people.
But no, there are people who are arguing about this, and there are
I know.
And there are people who are.
But the reason why they're arguing about this is because, from one standpoint, it's blatantly obvious what the correct thing is, and from the other point, it's blatantly obvious what the correct thing is, right?
I'm not following you on that.
Gender identity.
Yeah, okay.
Whatever the fuck you want to be.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel comfortable as identifying as,
right.
You do that. Good
now,
for
do
you.
We legislate for that? Do we legislate language?
We really shouldn't need to.
But
however, if there is a point where
such laws.
What?
So do you understand what I'm saying? Is like you're saying we never stop, but we've gotten so incredibly far that we are transforming our society in significant ways, going from a permissive society to a compulsive society based on abstractions. Gender identity, first of all, let's address a couple things here. Here's my straw man to kill. There is no such thing as gender. Okay, gender is a diminutive of what was gender roles, which we discussed earlier. And gender roles were fought against because it disadvantaged people. But gender itself in the real world boils down to self-concept. That's all it is. But now there are people who legislate their self-concept into other people being compelled to speak in certain ways, being shamed and ostracized if they use the wrong term, of being yelled at, of being assaulted, of a variety of things because of their self-concept. So if the idea is we never stop, at what point can we say, do you know what? Our society is amazing. Why don't we take 100 years and turn our attention to space travel?
Sure, go ahead. Turn your attention to whatever piques your interest, right? Those people that want to do space travel, yes, please go ahead, do. Elon Musk, awesome, do it, right? So
the point is, how far do we stop?
We have three open sidetracks here.
Okay.
So, on gender identity, my position: gender identity is real. It has always been real. It has been considered an evil, an aberration of human condition, to such an extent that people were mandated and subjected to torture, death, considered mentally ill if they expressed any diversity in their gender expression.
Okay.
My position is, if you want to call yourself an attack helicopter, call yourself an attack helicopter, right? Okay. It's a common slur against them, but why not fucking embrace it, right? What you feel like calling yourself is the proper way to identify you. You are the architect of your self-identification. However, you do have to earn it. You do have to fight for it. You do have to if you want it, you have to demand it. And that's what they're doing. And my position on that is, yay. Now, whether government should get involved, yes, at a point where there is an undue pressure from society for them not to do so. When there is...
That's a reverse. It should be the reverse.
If being a trans or a bi or a homo or a les or whatever is something that gets you shunned from society in the same way that you cannot get a job, that you cannot get education, that you get right, that you're a reject because of what you decided to call yourself. Well, for me personally, that's ridiculous. That's a remnant of a time that should have been long past. I am none of those things, and I don't have to call myself any of those things. And what you're going to call yourself, you call yourself, and I'm going to be polite enough to call you that.
Okay, so you choose as a matter of courtesy to address somebody the way that they would like to be addressed.
Exactly.
I have no problem with that. I have a problem when I am not I, but when one is shamed, berated, attacked, deplatformed, when these things make their way into regulations and rules and laws and signage on toilets, self-concept is by its own nature merely that. It is how a person conceives of oneself. And notice that I'm not using the word identity, because identity is not something that you have. It is identity does not exist. There is the process of identification. Identification is the action of one individual pointing to something out there in the world. That is a tree, that is a car, that is a man, that is a woman, and whatever distinctions you want to make. It is always the other who performs the act of identifying, of making one with the idea.
So what you're saying is I cannot say, this is me. That's not identification.
Good one. Hang on a second. Let me think about that, because that's a word thing. That, and technically now, and I'm not gonna fight for this one too hard. Technically, that would be self-announcing.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
But
you're announcing what you are. You're announcing what you want to be. You are announcing what you want to be addressed as or perceived as.
Okay, and I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
What I do have a problem with is when it is transformed into a legally and culturally enforced item.
Okay. So when a person comes out as being a cross-dresser, and he starts getting hate mail, death threats from random people who have never met him, who have seen online that he is a trans, and that happens on a scale that it's happening, then that person has the right to excessive protection by government, as in, oh, just by calling yourself that, just by being what you are being endangered by other people.
But it should not be made specific, because these laws already exist to cover the population as a whole. And the fact that you have one particular attribute, or you are small, you and a small number of people have a particular attribute that is not common to the general population, does not mean that a special law, which already exists to cover you, should specifically isolate you and your group for additional benefits which may be compelled socially and legally. There's already laws.
So
Murder, don't threaten, don't attack, don't. These laws already exist.
yeah, I agree with what you're saying to a point. But the fact is that with these laws existing and being present and known, there are literally gay bashing parties that a bunch of skins will get together, get clubs, and stake out a known gay club and wait for somebody to move away on their own and then beat the living shit out of that person.
Okay.
And at least in Croatia, that's a regular news item. And that's
but
so those laws are in place.
Protection of the law as individual citizens first.
What
are they? Are the gay people who are being beaten in your area? Are they denied the protection of the state because of their sexuality?
No. But those wait. If those laws are in place and these things happen as a noticeable pattern,
okay,
then there is action, right? Every law that we put in place that gets broken in certain circumstances excessively needs to be addressed specifically. If how do I put it? You have the law as a deterrent. The law is a ground level of this is how it should be, and we as a society accept that that's the way it should be. But here's this one instance where this special set of circumstances brings about breaking of that law constantly. Therefore, we need to address that special circumstance to enforce that law. They are protected by those laws. They should be protected by those laws. In their special circumstance, that doesn't come about. We need to make a special circumstance to make it come about because that's the law, right?
Okay, and so then to what degree?
And then to what degree? There is a degree of overreaction.
Because we've now homosexuality, which for the sake of the conversation, will simply stipulate that it's a genetic thing. Okay, they can't help it. For the sake of this conversation, because I don't really know the fact, I'll simply stipulate it. So we've moved. We were talking about gender identity. You've given the example of homosexuality. So let's move back to self-concept.
Yeah, it falls into the same category of things. Of I feel as X. Therefore, I identify as X and I am X. Those three statements. My personal image about myself is that I'm an X.
Okay.
Right? So gender identity and sexual orientation and race and whatever label you want to put on yourself is that thing. It's the identity politics is about whether you have the unlimited right to self-identify as whatever you want, and how can that right be restricted, and what consequences you should bear for that.
How about religion?
Same thing.
Protect people. A law specifically to protect specifically Christians, specifically Muslims, specifically Buddhists.
No, if the general law that is put in place so that people wouldn't kill themselves, attack them, kill each other, attack each other, violate each other, harm each other, is ineffective for protecting Muslims, then I am for a law which will specifically protect Muslims in proportional measure.
Because here's the thing. when see, again, this is a conflation between all of the individuals and a group. You can split things down so finely until, Francis Roy has a special law to protect him because he's the only guy named Francis Roy who wears glasses and has a mustache. Again, what are the limits?
If Francis Roy, sorry,
that's fine.
If Francis Roy is being targeted and attacked because he's Francis Roy and is being constantly attacked because he's Francis Roy, then he deserves special protection. So if there is a group of people who constantly comes to your house and regularly beats you up, you can ask for police protection, and you will get special police protection, which will be a car in your neighborhood, a couple of policemen. They will keep an eye out on people who are the ones who are assaulting you, and you will get special protection because of your special circumstance.
Okay, so how about
wait, just let me finish. In the identity arena, there are ways in which we classify people, in which we categorize people, which are ways in which literally they are targeted. If they are targeted as X, then we must protect X, whatever X is.
But then you end up protecting everyone because everyone is targeted.
Well, isn't that the point of the law?
But the point that I'm making is that these laws are already in place, and all that you end up doing is creating a bureaucratic nightmare of intersectional bureaucracy.
Yes. But it's the same. It's equivalent to the example of Francis Roy being targeted by someone and assaulted by someone, right? The fact that there is a law which says that you shouldn't be attacked, there must be some measure taken if you are actually being constantly and consistently attacked. In that case that we're talking now, there are overreaches. Right? There are overprotections. There are misguided laws. There are misapplications of the law. I think that the law for against hateful speech, which is something which is an innovation in all around the world.
It's a horrible one, yes.
It's cropping up in so many different kinds, is exactly the kind of experimentation that I like seeing done, and don't expect that it's perfect or will work first time around. The Canadian law that Peterson was objecting to, and like the you must use their pronoun practically before they tell you what pronoun they're using, right? That's a misfire, right? That's a mistake. That should go away, and there should be a public discourse about that. And Peterson is right to speak up against it. There are a lot of ways in which these laws are misfiring. However, this is the first iteration of the law. There is a separate law in Croatia, there is a separate law in Germany, there is a separate law in Britain, in Netherlands, in Switzerland, in the US, in Canada. Everybody's trying to solve the problem. Why? Because there is a problem to be solved. Because with the advent of internet, with the advent of doxing, with the advent of you opening up Google and finding out somebody's home address and being able to molest them without them ever being aware of who you are, sending them orders or sending them death threats in a way which is anonymous beyond all measure, is something that we as a society have not encountered before. We're encountering it now, and we're trying to combat it. The fact that the law isn't perfect and is not the ideal solution does not mean that we can therefore ignore the problem until somebody pops up with the perfect solution, right?
Hang on a second.
If you object to the law, Right.
But
Let's have that wrong law. Then we will correct to some extent. Then we will probably overcorrect it to under-regulated. Then we will correct a bit more, and we will get over years and decades and governments to a point which is functional and works. And when one country finds it, it will
we will
spread
crash,
like wildfire. Sorry,
or we will crash and burn in our
we
experiment.
won't crash and burn. We're nowhere near that fragile.
I hope so.
If that's the thing that'll make civilization crash and burn, then the civilization does not justify its existence.
I hate to admit it, but I agree with you. One of the big things in Quebec is that the Quebecois have long felt outnumbered, outmatched by the number of Anglos that surround them. And so they started doing things like creating La Loi 101, Law 101, which is a language bill that says that every sign must have only French or French written at a certain proportion to which English can, in terms of the height and the quantity. So they started regulating these things, and we won't talk about overreach on there. But oh, hang on, I just lost my train of thought. But as I've often said, it's like, for example, I grew up speaking French, and then I spent a lot of my life in English Canada, which means that I lost a lot of my French, and I have a really thick accent. Well, I have a detectable accent when I speak in French, and people often ask me, where are you from? Yet when I came back, I wanted to pick up my French again, and I would ask people, please speak to me only in French. But as soon as they heard my English accent, they insisted on speaking to me in English, which, by the way, they didn't speak well. And so, you know, when I hear in my area that Quebec wants its own sovereignty, I've always believed that if the society will not do what it takes to keep itself alive, it doesn't deserve to survive. But as a member of a Western society that believes in liberalism, that believes in eudaimonia, that believes in cures for cancer and rockets in space, and who believes in people being safe to create new generations which will carry on these values, I have a certain amount of concern that, again, we are creating a corrosive acid to the bones of our society. And give me a moment here. I'm just to reorient myself. And my concern is that we are swinging very far on the pendulum, and it is possible that it may break. Now, should it deserve to live or not? That's for another person to decide. I would like for our value system to survive. I would like for us to live in peace. I would like for us to continue doing well and making a better world for our children. At the same time, I look at being caught in the middle of these transitions, these changes where errors are being made. I also know that bureaucracy will hold on to things for as long as it can. And these are long-lasting effects, and they're cumulative, and outgrowths grow upon this. And so when I look at some of these laws, when I look at the social attitudes that people are bringing, rather than going back to basic items of liberty, of personal independence, of self-reliance, of building one's character, of building one's mind, where the individual is the locus of power over his or her own life, the way things are going right now is people are being treated like they're weak, so laws are made to protect them, and it's going too far in this direction. And this brings us back to the original thread that got us started. This is the point that I was sort of starting to make. This is the aspect of the extreme left that I reject, because these are the on-the-ground consequences.
So I would say that issue is the extremes, either the left or the right. The people who pull so hard, like it is that anchoring problem that we talked about, the digging in, the oh, you have swung it too far to the left, now we must swung it all the way to the right. No. We need to swung it slightly. We need to slide it to the right, and if we overstep, then we can slide it slightly less to the left, right? The point is that every system that we have, that our entire society is agile, is self-correcting, is right. It will make errors, and then it will correct those errors. And if it overcorrects those errors, then it will correct the overcorrection. No law, no tradition, no culture was created perfect. Well, the thing that's a problem here is that this is a new circumstance. The internet is a new circumstance. The interconnectivity that we have, the anonymity that we have. One of the prime reasons why when I am on Hangouts, I am on camera is kind of to combat that. I do not want to be anonymous. I want to show my face.
I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah. And why I reach out to you to talk about these things is because I believe that there needs to be a reach out, a communication, a moderation of the public discourse. That what's going on is that the extremes are pushing their ways, and the moderates, which are mostly normal people, are doing what normal people do when things become this extreme and say, this is bad for me. The best thing I can do for myself is to remove myself from this conversation and just stop worrying, because all the worry and all the stress is making me miserable and I'm not enjoying life. And I can remove myself, stop participating in that, and let them fight it out, which is making things worse because we're getting the excluded middle.
I agree. Right? Well, one of the things that I find interesting about what you're saying is, for one thing, you're cutting into a little bit of you are helping me reduce a little bit of my cynicism, which quite frankly is a good thing. And at the same time, if you think about it, if we are in fact strong enough and we are self-correcting, this means that people like me, and what this means is in the 60s, in the late 50s to mid 70s, I would say, we had a big shift. We had a big push in a certain direction, of which in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, we're still going on the momentum of this. And maybe we're approaching somewhere near the peak of where the ball is going to swing. And very much what we're seeing, what is being called, how the regressives are calling anybody who's not them Nazis, and so on and so forth. This pushback, it needs almost a counter rebellion. And this might be the phase that we're in.
Yeah, and it has it. It has it in the alt-right. It has it in Trump. It has it in the rise of the right in Europe. Right. This is the overcorrection.
Yeah, I can see that point too.
The point is, I am a progressive left liberal. That does not mean that I believe that a government made up of 100% progressive left liberals is the solution. I do not want my side to unilaterally win the war and have everything like rule the world, and that would solve the problem. No. These are my beliefs, and these are the things that make sense to me, and they are the natural way for me to act. But looking objectively, what I want is a strong, reasonable, conservative, right-wing party which will be a counter to what I believe, which will be a sanity check to what I believe. I am reckless. I am willing to make mistakes, to fix things that aren't broken, to right. I am cognizant of that. I want somebody who will run in parallel with me, take a look at what I'm doing, and point out to dude, this is slightly insane. You should moderate it a little bit, right? We don't want to lose everything. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Stuff like that. I want
Remarkably self-aware,
constructive, conservative opposition, or a moderate conservative rule with the left opposition. Right? I want a stability in the system because that works. That has worked for a long time and has brought more prosperity than anything else.
Yeah.
The fact that I am this does not mean that I want all of that.
Also, just this is just going to be a little sidebar here. In North America, the word progressive has a very specific meaning. When you say the words progressive, I understand that. I think I understand that what you're saying is forward moving and willing to experiment. This is close to the original sense of the word when the word progressive was. Oh, I forget which American president was now. It's like I'm not retaining the facts anymore. Progressivism, I think, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, started with Theodore Roosevelt, and it had a very specific set of positions to progress out of a situation. But the word progressive itself has morphed its meaning. The word progressive has progressed into different meanings. So now when one says the word progressive, it is frequently very close to what we think of as regressive. And so this is just a little word thing that when you're speaking to North Americans, you might want to be attentive of that. But I understand.
So I mean it in the sense of the third axis of the opposite of conservative. Again, of the opposite of the meaning of the word conservative, not the political party or the political movement.
Yes, the inverse of tradition based.
Yes,
forward moving as opposed to conserving.
Yes.
Yeah, I am mean that.
Futurist or technocratic or right. We
totally get it.
Yeah, there is a scientific approach to all of these things, which is do some things, see what happens, note what happens, do some other things, see what happens, and see if you can see a trend line there, right?
Yeah.
And then align the trend line so that you get the best possible outcome.
Well, I'm also like that, but I think that one of the things that temperamentally makes me a centrist is because I also am very forward-moving. I'm willing to try things. I'm open-minded. But there gets to be a point where you drive the car so fast you think, maybe it's time to put on the brakes because I might not be able to control this car. So, you know, I certainly, the reason I refer to myself as a centrist is because I have both temperaments and I'm willing to accept the ideas, all the useful, workable ideas. You know, it's remarkably nice to have a conversation where you can work these things out. And it's like, you know, it's like we don't agree on everything, but I think generally our direction agrees. But you know what? It's getting a little bit late for me.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to have to hit the sack. So, tell you what, if people want to, do you have a website you want to point people to? Where could people read more about your stuff?
You can find me on Google Plus in the Great Debate community or the Great Debate community, in Discord in the Great Debate gaming community.
I have to learn about that Discord man thing. As far as I understand, it's like public. It's like another version of Hangouts. Is that right?
It's It's significantly better than Hangouts.
Okay.
And significantly better. It's chat Hangout thing, which is mostly integrated with video games, but it can be used for anything.
Okay. So that's one of the things. And for me, if people want to reach me, well, I like to point them to my G Plus page. It's just I think it's plus.google.com/Francis Roy, FRANCISROY. Just look it up. And on that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the stream and let's continue chatting for a couple of minutes. Yeah?
Sure.